All right, welcome back to another episode of Phoenix Edge. This is an RPG and gaming news podcast. My name is Het.
And I'm Eric.
And I am Stan.
And today we are going to wrap up our Final Fantasy VII Remake spoiler discussion. So I just want to emphasize here that we are going to be covering entirely every spoilerific thing you can think about with the remake, and also the original Final Fantasy VII and some of the surrounding compilation games as well. So if you do not want to be spoiled, this is not a place to be. And I just want to give you a moment here to just go ahead and exile this video, go play the game, and then come back. So the topics that we are going to be covering today, we're going to be talking about the expansion or added parts of the story. So these are things that are new to the game that weren't in the original. Then we're going to talk about some of the controversial changes to the original that we have strong feelings about. You know, so things that were just basically changed from the original that are controversial to us. Then we're going to be touching on some of the stuff that we thought the 7 Remake did well that was in keeping with the original game. And we're also going to be talking about some of our favorite cast members and things like that. And then finally, we're going to be topping things off with what we think the game could have done better or what could have been done to improve the game as it is, with also some Discord questions as well. So that's the topics for today. And I want to also just emphasize one more time that this is a spoiler conversation. So let's go ahead and move into our first topic. All right, so we're on our first topic here. We're going to talk about the expansion or the added parts of the story. Again, this is complete spoilers. So if you haven't figured that out by now, sorry, but we're completely spoiling the game here. But we're going to be talking about the expansion or the added or new parts of the story in this segment here. So I know, Eric, you had something you wanted to bring up with the Ultimania, I believe. Do you want to just kind of address that now?
Yes. One thing I've noticed, a couple people, not particularly people who have responded directly to us in this channel, but a lot of people I have debated with about this game, about the quality of its story or if there's things missing. People have tried to throw the recent Ultimania back at me for certain explanations or justifications for things that seemed off in the original. And all I'm going to say is I am basing my criticisms purely off the game itself. If I need some book to help explain things for me that should have been explained in the game to begin with, which makes it really sound like the stuff in the Ultimania is an afterthought instead of like something they intended to be in the story. Because if it was, they would have at least addressed that. If not, that's pretty bad directing and writing on top of that. So any criticisms I have are purely with the game itself. If there's an explanation in the Ultimania, great, but I did not read it. I don't really care to read those either. I just look at the product itself that was given to me and base my criticisms purely off that.
I agree. I mean, here's the thing. I know that all the Final Fantasies, they all have an Ultimania. They all go a little bit more in depth into the world. And there's been times where I've actually really found some of the stuff interesting, particularly around Final Fantasy X, you know, where they go into the prior history. And I've seen YouTubers like Lore Runner be able to pull stuff out of that. And, you know, Final Fantasy Peasant be able to theorize based on that. That's all really, really interesting stuff. But, you know, if somebody's saying, well, this didn't really make sense in the game, and I thought that they could have done a better job with it, the fact that it's in an Ultimania doesn't really make it that much better, right? I mean, if you're going to have an ambiguous ending or you're going to have an ambiguous plot point for us to theorize about, that's cool. But I mean, if you're just going to print the answer in the book, it's kind of takes away from that also. So,
yeah, no, don't get me wrong. It's really cool when you get expanded lore on content. Like, I liked reading the stuff on Final Fantasy IX. That was like really cool stuff you find in the Ultimania. But I'm referring mostly to information that should have been present in the game that was missing And if that's like a missing part of the story for me, I'm like, wait, why is this happening? Why is this particular thing? Or like why the particular events are bending the rules to what are the established rules in the story, and then I have to go to an Ultimania and say, "Oh, that was the reason why." It's like that's not good storytelling. Like if it's like an already completed story, and you want to add additional lore to it to make the already good experience better, that's cool. I'm not referring to that stuff. I'm referring to stuff that we mostly criticize, and then someone tries to pull an Ultimania book at me, like, well, actually, if you read the book, you would understand. Like, no, it's like I shouldn't have to read a book
See,
in that case.
yeah. And the thing is, I totally understand where people are coming from when they want to bring that up because I've been in a similar boat at times. I mean, I watched the Witcher Netflix series and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But other people that this was their only experience with The Witcher, they looked at it and thought, what the hell is going on? And I would be like, well,
Confusing, man.
it's because I had this experience with the books and I played the video games, so I could kind of piece stuff together better. But you didn't experience that, so that's why you're not enjoying it as well as I am. But I totally realize it's a flaw of the show. It could have been way clearer with some of that stuff. So, but what I'm trying to get at is that if you're finding enjoyment out of the game because of that, I think that's really cool because I've been in the same boat too, where I've been able to enjoy something because of other pieces of media and the knowledge I had with that. So
Yeah, if you enjoy it, but just don't make it an expectation out of people who only viewed the original content I was given to them. Because, like Hat said, you shouldn't expect people to read every single Witcher book before that show came out
yeah,
to get the context of everything they may have missed or dropped the ball on in the show.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Stan, do you have anything to add before we?
Um, just that I agree, pretty much. With any kind of like, there's a distinction, like Eric pointed out, between an expansion of an existing story, right, versus using added media to kind of patch inconsistencies or holes, like in the original work, right? That doesn't actually like erase the fact that the original, whatever it is, TV show or video game or book, like has missing elements or confusing plot points, right? Another easy example is Final Fantasy 15, right, where a lot of the character development for the like Prompto, Ignis, and Gladio are not in the game. They're in the Brotherhood anime, the short anime episodes they produced for the game, and then also in their DLC episodes. Right, there's more in there. Right now, it's not really a satisfying answer to, like, if someone's saying like, oh well, Prompto's character development is kind of lacking for most of the game. Are you just going to tell that person like, well, did you play the DLC and did you watch the his Brotherhood anime episode? I mean, you can, but it's that doesn't excuse the original for not having enough character development for that particular character. It may it may balance it out, make it better, but that doesn't suddenly make that not a good criticism of the game just because other material expanded on the character, or not expanded, but like filled in the gaps, right?
Yeah, but I mean, if you're trying to predict where the series is going, right, and you're theorizing based on events in the game, I think then bringing in the Ultimadia is totally makes sense because if that actually gives clarity to certain plot points that it didn't do a good job of, and then you're trying to theorize where they're going to go in the second game, and the Ultimania just will kind of provide further clarity on that, maybe. I think then it's totally worthwhile, but that's a totally different type of conversation.
It's useful for that purpose, for sure.
But Stan, what did you think about the new or added parts of the story in this game? Did you have something that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah. So for for FF7 Remake, I really like how they expanded on Shinra in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not like one event, but it's kind of sprinkled in throughout the game.
Sure.
And it's really all about the propaganda element
Yeah.
to the.
Oh yes.
It was much more prevalent, like kind of throughout the game. They during the second bombing mission, they kind of even show you like news footage, and they show you how they've like spun the narrative, against Avalanche, and it's also very useful that as you walk by, just kind of like NPCs in the world, you'll hear like some people saying like, yeah, screw the people who live up on the top plate and screw the Shinra or whatever. But then other people will be like, wow, Avalanche is horrible. Like, why are they doing these bombings? So it's like it's not so cut and dry that it's not like everybody hates the Shinra or everybody hates Avalanche.
Yeah, we even get that at the beginning of the game with the Shinra manager and his 2 employees next to him cheering him on, like telling a gigantic, scary dude with a gun arm off who's a very, who gets triggered very easily.
Right.
Yeah, that guy.
I'd be like, shut my mouth, shut my mouth, shut.
Yeah.
Are you talking about with the Shinra employees on the train, or?
Yes.
Yeah. That part was just, I loved it.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Because, they're reciting the Shinra Creed, which ties into the propaganda element that Stan's talking about. But then they almost have this like weird clapping thing that they were all doing, which reminds me of like modern day snapping. Like, yeah, we really agree,
Yeah. I thought it was a little awkward, but I appreciate they at least got the message out there, or established that like Avalanche is not liked by upper class people, and the Shinra, they use the media to let them know, or the bill, or where they work, make it look like it's like the greatest place to be.
Yeah.
And Avalanche has no right coming in taking it away. I will say the best thing one of the best things I loved in this game, and it's just to add on what the Stan said, is the walkthrough tour of Shinra in the Shinra building.
Yeah, that
was 100% executed. It was so awesome.
Yeah.
You get the tour, you get to see like every person, like the like you see how Palmer's space program works, and you kind of get like a little bit of like their personality. Ojo is like, I don't have time for this crap. Like, why am I doing like a tour thing? And then after, you get one of the most beautiful CG animated things I've seen, where they get their vision of what the Promised Land looks like, or like how the ancients live together, and what Neo Midgar looks like, what their vision of Neo Midgar looks like. I thought that was just an excellent addition to the Shinra propaganda.
Yeah,
it's like going to Disney World essentially.
Yes, exactly. And like the narrator spins the story as if like Shinra is just kind of taking up the work that the ancients started, right? They're no different. They're just the ancients also harness the power of materia, and we're kind of harnessing the power of Mako too, so really we're just kind of we're just carrying their legacy forward, right? And so we're searching for the Promised Land just like they wanted to find it, and we'll build this utopia and it'll be great, And it's like you said, like Disney World kind of esque presentation to it.
See,
that's how you would present it to your just the average person. That's how you would present your company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing is, with me, I know that I've seen some people feel that when stories or games, specifically games, they use this museum type event to have world building. They feel that's like a cheap way out. But I'm the total opposite if it makes sense. And I thought it made perfect sense where it was that you would have a visitor center. President Shinra is very egotistical. I mean, you walk into this place and there's a giant gold statue of President Shinra. And it's just like, you gotta be friggin' kidding me. You know?
He's like, he says, they walk into the room and he just looks up and he sees it and he says, "Oh, hell no."
Yeah, that's crazy. What he said. It was just like, dude, this is fantastic. But and yeah, and like Eric was bringing up, I mean, like you go by and do these presentations, and the only one that actually does it, I think, is Reeve, whereas Hojo's just like, why am I even doing this? You know, the other ones aren't even ready. But that there's so much good stuff in that part of the game that I feel was really added that I think was an improvement, right? And I not to knock the original, but this is stuff where if you're expanding the game, if you're adding more time to the game, the CG presentation where they're going into the back history of the ancients, they're describing the history of the city, they're describing Shinra where he wants to go. That is stuff that like I would much rather have stuff that like that rather than these 2.5 hour dungeons, you know? So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, another thing I loved in that building, that's kind of like part of it too. I really like they expanded on the mayor of Midgar because in the original, the only thing he was there for to give you a puzzle and a key card to go up because the mayor has gotten more and more irrelevant over the years, and they established that in this game too that he's like a bookkeeper to Shinra. This actually really makes sense that he would get mad enough at Shinra for undermining his power that he would result to helping Avalanche
yeah.
knock them down a peg. And that really does make sense. And I thought that was actually a really good addition and actually to make his character somewhat relevant and actually improved upon the original.
Yeah, he's actually something that I remember thinking I want to bring this character up because I just loved Mayor Domino. Like because of what you said, Eric, the fact that the original game you have a machine gun armed man and a guy with a giant sword walking around these halls, clear fits the clear profile of Avalanche, and you're talking to people in suits. No one says anything in this realistic environment. It's kind of weird. They even show you running into people, and they're like, "Oh, you know, like why isn't anybody hitting the alarm?" And Mayor Domino is able to like cover that up and fill the gaps because he's an inside man as part of Avalanche. But I love the back and forth he had with the party about why he's doing it and why he's joining Avalanche. And it's essentially because Shinra has placed him in the library, which is very similar to the original. But he's like, they don't even invite me to board meetings. All I do is reports. My fingers have more paper cuts than skin. And Barrett's just like, okay, man. Shinra did you wrong like us. And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, dude, Shinra dropped Sector 7 on their homes. And this guy's complaining about paper cuts and not being invited to board meetings. But I loved it because it was his character. He's like the password. Remember when they talk about what's the password to find, you know, the person that's going to help him? He's like, the mayor is the best, the better than the rest. And or whatever.
He goes off, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just like, dude, this character is so perfect. Like, and it's just like, I'm so glad that oh my God, I loved Mayor Domino. He was a great addition to the later part of the game for me.
Yeah, it was kind of a different take, right? Because in the original, the idea is you made it through the Shinra building because President Shinra knew you were there the whole time, and so it was like a trap, essentially. But in this one, it's more like they're only making it as far as they can because they have Mayor Domino on the inside helping them out as like a secret Avalanche sympathizer.
Yeah. And you know, I was wondering how they're going to fit Cloud, Tifa, and Barrett up in the vent, and just to sneak up on Shinra. I was praying that it wouldn't be another dungeon where instead of like going through a vent, it's like actually they go through like the top full ventilation system dungeon where they got to shift like the air currents to make sure they're going through the right place just to get a sneak at Shinra talking. I'm very glad they didn't do that. Like I'm giving props to a game for not doing something.
Yeah,
they just put Cloud up there. Cloud
and Tifa, I believe.
Cloud and Tifa, right? Barrett couldn't fit, so he had to sit on the toilet.
Had that part where they're climbing through the vent, I enjoyed the story aspect of that, but my game actually froze while I was in the vent.
That's right, yeah.
Or it didn't freeze, basically when it went down that crossroads where you could go left or right, I went right because I thought maybe there was a chest or something down there or some materia. You know, why would they build this hallway, this other way for you to go if there was nothing down there? There was nothing down there. So then I went back and I tried to, you know, go back and turn, and I turned, and then I had to go left. And no matter what, my character would not go left. I went all the way to the beginning, all the way to the back, and I was just losing my mind. I got out of the vent, went back in. He would not go left. And I sat there for 45 minutes doing this. And finally, I was like, whatever. I reset the game. I lost a bunch of progress at the Coliseum there in the Shinra building. Very upset. But I went up there first time. He went left. So that part annoyed me, but it's not anything to do with the story. It's just, you know, I'm sure that it hasn't been that part wasn't as tested as much as it could have been. So, but
Yeah.
how do you guys feel about the story sequence though, when they're peering inside from the vent? Because they made a few changes. It's mostly notable to be the same, but if I remember correctly, the original plan with Hojo was that he was going to try to breed Aerith with Red 13, which is frightening, but that's because the longevity of the species. But in this one, he's just like, oh, we're going to have all of Soldier basically impregnate her and have lots of ancient babies, which is almost even like, that's almost way worse. Well, that's actually, I don't know which one's worse, but both of those are terrible.
I guess you don't like, they only applied it in the original game,
right?
But I guess it's really much harder to imply it in the remake. So I understand why they're not promoting bestiality in the game.
But it's like, oh, gang rape is better. I guess it would be artificial.
Take your poison, I guess, but I guess you don't want a teen-rated game saying like, yeah, so we're gonna have this big ferocious monster mate with this cute little flower girl to make more ancients. It's really hard to pull off something like that, and people just not raising an eyebrow to it. People already raised an eyebrow to it in the original. Like, what? Like, no.
Yeah. The thing is, this game, I'm just baffled that it even got a teen rating because of the amount of cursing that's in this game. And then that scene in Wall Market where Cloud essentially gets a sexual favor and the hand massage place is just very sexual, right? And so it's I feel that they must be really on the line here with, if they had one more curse word or they had one more thing, it would have gone into the mature rating, because I'm surprised at what they were able to include. And even with this scene with Hojo just bringing up, yeah, we're going to have all Soldier, just, you know, see what happens. We're just going to impregnate her with that. Like, that's very mature for a 12 or 13-year-old, you know? So it's very, very crazy.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they determine that. I'm guessing as long as there's no on the cursing side, if you don't drop any F-bombs, yeah, that you are fine.
Dude, but
it must be because
they dropped
they say everything else, you know.
Lots of times. Yeah. Yeah. I almost wish that they could have had two versions of this game, right? Because you have CDs that have censored and non-censored versions. If they could have just had a censored and non-censored version of Final Fantasy VII, because there's lots of moments in this game where I felt that because of the teen rating, they kind of held back certain things, whereas it would have been a little bit better with that mature rating. You know, we talked about the trail of blood being purple, the inability to show people that are dying, not able to see the blood or anything like that. You know, I'm kind of disappointed we couldn't get that, but I understand that'd be pretty much a new thing.
I do really wonder how much sales are affected by putting a mature rating on it, I guess.
What if they offered both, though? It seems like you would have more sales.
I think it'd be odd in general just to add a whole thing just to please a certain audience for that. I think you either have to make a way to work with it. I think I would have even understood if they just had, like, you remember there's the Genova trail that when Sephiroth like takes like Genova, there's like a whole like purple trail of
Right.
that. I don't know why they couldn't have done that. Like, you could have just had like soldiers who are dead on the ground, don't have to show blood, just show that they're like
Covered
they've been
in.
taken out in some
Yeah.
form, and then you just have the Genova trail come. Like, that would have, I think that would have worked out and still kept the teen rating. I don't know why they couldn't have done it. Oh, right, because there's a 2-hour dungeon in between the jail cell and President Shinra.
Yeah.
God,
So
I can't believe they did that. Like when we played through, like, you know, I played through the original. Like, hey, you remember that whole 2-hour dungeon that we went through in the lab to get to the top floor? I was like, well, we're already here.
Yeah.
yeah.
We went straight from the prison to the top floor, and it took like a minute and a half.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I think that they don't have to completely recreate another version of the game, though. I think that just having small changes, I mean, just have the scenes that you already have, like the purple blood just being red, having a few bodies there. You don't have to completely recreate the entire game. I mean, we have edited movies for TV. I don't think it would be that big of a deal, but I guess if they haven't done it yet, that's why. So, what did you guys think about Roche? Because I have some thoughts with him. Well, let me just give you my thoughts, and I'm sure we're in complete agreement with this guy. I mean, initially when we saw Roche, we dubbed him Soldier Joe Dirt for the amount of cheese factor that I felt this guy, or we felt this guy brought to the table. You know, that was with his dialogue, with, you know, his character design. And I would say that after playing this game, he brought that cheese level to new heights that I did not even expect. Right? So we have the cheesy evil guy laugh. We have the cheesy Joe Dirt mullet. We have cheesy dialogue like you turn the key and the engine roars with excitement. And we have over the top acrobatics that breaks any sense of physics the game established. So all along the list, check marks, but I would have accepted all that if we actually got what we thought he was going to bring to the table, was an inside look into Soldier. We should have been seeing him interacting with Shinra, other soldier members, you know, what is the life of Shinra's soldier arm. But all we ever see of this guy is him patrolling the roads, and all he ever talks about is wanting to dance with Cloud and him laughing. We don't actually see any kind of expansion on the soldier aspect of, you know, the story. And to me, it felt kind of like, why is this guy even here if we're not going to use that? Because I know that when this was announced, lots of people were defending him by saying, "Oh, it's world building. Of course, there's other members of Soldier in the game." And now that was kind of a point against the prior game that you didn't really run into any. And now we have that. But he didn't provide any context to that world.
They don't even bring up really that he's a soldier, like in a detailed form. Like, oh, hey, a soldier.
Yeah.
I guess we got to go beat him up or something. Roche, I saw him and I was like, I know this is going to be a very annoying character. He's going to pop up once in a while. I'm going to have him be like the kind of maybe like the Gilgamesh of boss fights. Like, you know, Final Fantasy V, Gilgamesh comes out once in a while to try to defeat you, but like ends with him like getting beaten in some comical manner. Like, I could maybe appreciate it, maybe a little to that extent, but he never comes back. You beat him once, and like I'm wondering, like, all right, where's the part where Roche is just going to come in? I even thought like he may come in like the end motorcycle sequence, maybe, but this was like a completely wasted character, and for how much I wasn't probably going to enjoy him. Maybe the developers thought the same thing. They're like, hey, you know what? I don't think this character is going to work. Let's just keep him that one-time thing. Like, they shouldn't have even made a design out of him. Then they should have just made him like a boss, just like a normal boss, like a third class soldier, have a helmet over him, because that's really what he amounts to at the end of the day with this game.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to add a character and you're going to have several sequences, 2 boss fights with him, at least provide something to kind of flesh out the world with this character. I know that some people I've seen online actually like Roche because he is that cheesy and over the top. They felt that there was a lot of these moments in the original game that were very corny and but also kind of funny, and that this guy kind of shows that Square is still going to be willing to go there. I can see where they're coming from. I don't know if I would go this far, but he has to provide something else to the story besides wiping all the enemies out and giving Cloud an elixir. You know?
That, like you guys said, he's a very one-note character, and also his inclusion doesn't make any sense. He doesn't add anything to Soldier, and then at the same time, he saves the party, saves Avalanche and Cloud at the end of chapter 4. But then when he leaves, they're just surrounded again and have to be saved once again by another group. So like, you could very easily write Roche out of the story, and you don't lose anything, right? Other than a cool boss fight in like during the motorcycle sequence. He doesn't add anything. Like you can, I mean, it's very possible that they added this guy in after the sequence or the story was complete, right? And they're just like, hey, just for fun, let's throw in this new character, because then, like you mentioned, he's not utilized at any other point in the game. It's only in that specific chapter, and that chapter has enough kind of goofy cheese factor for it going without him as well, right? With like the Avalanche members, like you didn't need to insert an unnecessary character for the purpose of adding humor to a section that already had humor going for it already,
Yeah.
So like, yeah, and like it was odd because they like showed him in several of the trailers, right? But then you have a character like Chadley that you like interact with way more, and he's not. I don't remember seeing him in any of the trailers. He was like mentioned in an article or something, So, and I understand that. Yeah, I understand that like a character on a motorcycle is probably more exciting for a trailer, which is probably why they did that in the first place, But there are other characters that are like new and also feel like they actually add to the story that they're telling. Right?
If you actually go through the whole thing with Chadley, I still don't like that character, but they give some background with him, that he's a intern, he works at Hojo, but he's actually fighting against them from the inside, which is kind of interesting. And from what I understand, he's a artificial intelligence. He's actually not even a real person once you get to the final end of it. So think about that. We have a guy that his only purpose is to give us little VR missions. And that person gave us more insight than Roche, a guy that got lots and lots of cutscenes. It's just, you guys really missed the ball with this. So, it is what it is. I'm sure that he's going to return in part 2. I'm not looking forward to it, but you have to do something with him. You can't just introduce that and then never have it appear again. I guess you can, but
he's so random. You could put him in anything, really.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you could even have him like in Casa del Sol if you want.
He's there with Hojo getting a suntan.
Speaking of that part, I will say I did in general enjoy that they expanded on the Avalanche members more, Jesse in particular.
Yes.
The thing I don't care for, it's like, okay, so Jesse's mom is led to believe that she is working as an actress at the Gold Saucer. And Biggs and Wedge are just friends of hers. Okay, so they come in with this battle gear.
Yeah.
Like she's all militarized, and so are Biggs and Wedge. We couldn't change into like more appropriate clothing to kind of just throw her off. And then right after they visit their mom, they have a whole act. That whole act happen at the Shinra base.
hmm
What? And like, wouldn't your what? Like, all right. So if I was her mother, I see her in military uniforms. I'd be like, okay. And then a Shinra base right down the street from me gets blown up right after. I'll be like, huh. I'm starting to think that she may not be an actress.
She's a Civil War reenactment or something. I don't know.
I mean, but I like
reenactment.
that they showed her reason for joining Avalanche. Like, so it's the stuff that happened to her father
Mhm.
was like a motivation for her to join the group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, I like they expanded upon on that. I just think the execution could have been a tad better.
I actually have a point that I want to bring up with Jesse's character that kind of ties into that. You guys mind if I bring that up right now? Because
Go ahead.
okay, so like you're saying, Eric, you know, they do this setup of this stuff that's just beautiful with besides the humor with why are they wearing military gear, but the fact that you go and meet her mom and you find her father that's a vegetable and all that stuff. So they set up her character arc beautifully, right? But I feel that her character arc never really pays off, and I hate that. So they set up two conflicts in this chapter. Conflict one, her dad's a vegetable and she needs to bomb these reactors, she believes, because his soul won't go back to the planet. And therefore, if she bombs enough reactors, her dad's going to be able to die and he'll be in peace. Okay, that's conflict one. Conflict two, she thinks that she's behind the bombs, that she's killed all these people. They keep bringing that up. She feels guilty about it. She can't figure out why the bombs are that big. You know, it's just a constant source of frustration for her. So those are the two sources of conflict they introduced for her. And by the time they finish her character in this game, aside from the ending, I'm not even going to talk about that. But in this game, when they finished her character arc, when she dies, right? Not only did they write her out of the bombing mission of the reactor right after they established this was the thing that would release her father's soul. I thought that was baffling. So now we don't even have that. And I thought it was even weirder that we don't get a scene with her father passing away and she gets some kind of closure like, oh, okay, maybe doing this, at least let my father pass on. Maybe while Cloud was in Wall Market, we could have had that. But also the fact that it's literally told, like Heidegger literally tells Cloud, Tifa, and Barrett that I literally went and looked at what they said. He says, Shinra says, henceforth, allies of Wicked Wutai, our sworn enemy. Thank you for stoking our people's patriotic fervor. Barrett says, Wutai, the hell we are. Heidegger says, you still don't understand your role in this. Camera shows a screen in front of them with little robots on the bomb. And Barrett says, what are you doing? And Heidegger says, don't you see, you fools were never in control? Never anything but pawns in our plans to sell great and glorious war to the people, and instruments of insurrection will detonate when we so choose. And then you see Tifa trying to hit the trigger and the bomb won't explode, right? So this directly ties in to Jesse's character arc because she's like self-deprecating. I killed all these people. And in her death scene, she's sitting there like, oh, I like, it's all my fault. They were all my victims. I had it coming. And Cloud and Tifa are just sitting there like, not saying anything.
Say anything.
They don't say anything, and they just let this woman die thinking she committed genocide and her father's still a vegetable. I was just you guys just like set this character up great, and then you just drop the ball.
Yeah, I would have personally done. I would have added a whole chapter. Like, let's take away either the sewer or the train graveyard dungeon. Let's turn that into a full chapter instead, where we go to the perspective of where Barrett is at the time that they're doing this. This is when they should have introduced the secret lab underneath Sector 7. Like, this should have been like one of the characters finds like something crazy and like Barrett and them go and investigate And this is like the opportunity to be like with Barrett, because they already did a section with Barrett by himself. So, you could do that and then have them be like guest characters assisting him. And then they discover the underground Sector 7 stuff going on. And this can expand on Jessie's story on what happened to her father. Like, he was part of this underground.
Yeah.
And that could have expanded and brought some form of closure to her story.
Before the plate falling sequence, yeah.
If they could have had during that segment, if they added that segment, if they could have had them do something additional to Shinra, and then as a result, she gets a phone call from her mother that her father passed, and they have to go to a funeral. It could have been a little cutscene, but Barrett and Tifa could have been there with Jessie during her father's funeral, but she would have been a little bit at peace because now she knows that the reason she joined Avalanche, that her father's returned to the planet. That would have been great for her character, and it would have established that all this mumbo jumbo about the planet being alive, there might be something to it.
Yeah.
So I just couldn't believe they fumbled the ball with Jessie.
It's just, instead of trying to make these legit expansions, because in the interviews, they're like, we want to expand on Midgar so much. We want to show you stuff that you didn't see before, or get in the context of some things. And like, while some things may have been better than others, I at least appreciate they added new story stuff, like when we met Roche and Jesse's mother and stuff like that. I thought we were going to get more of that going through the game.
Yeah, and
I was like, some scenes may be better than others, but I at least see they're trying to expand on Midgar in meaningful ways. And then right after that, we don't ever really get something like that again. And at the most, we get something that feels pointless, like this underground Sector 7. That's never brought up again after they get out. Like, what was the point of this then? We went in and got Wedge? That was clear padding.
Yeah.
Absolute clear padding. And the stuff with Jessie actually felt like was like meaningful content that didn't feel like padding.
So on that note, I do think that they were able to show certain parts where they did get it, where I think they should have just continued doing this, right? And the one part where I felt they did a really good job, at least for me, was the Wall Market segment, because not only did that city just feel alive with, just walking around and having shady stuff in the background and, seeing the teacher that's dances here at night, just great world building, but also the characters that you interact with, the new characters, I thought added a lot to the story. I mean, we got Madam M, Andrea, and Sam, and these are all brand new characters, and they're actually interesting NPCs. They're not like the prior sectors where it's just some guy in a lab coat, like, oh, I can't find my medicine. These are actual people with characterizations. They have little rivalries between each other, and they help to build up Don Corneo because you have to go through them just to get to Don Corneo. And they, like I said, they all have unique personalities, which just adds to the mystique and just the interest of Wall Market. And this is stuff that's added that stretched out the length of time. And I thought it was good. I thought it was great. That was pretty much fully developed for what it was. And I thought that if they just should have just kept doing that with the other sectors as well, that would have been fine, because this stuff directly tied with the story. It wasn't, the ghost in the train yard thing that didn't even tie to anything.
Yeah. The one thing I did want to see is the rivals are all very mature people that you believe are leading these sector groups or whatnot. And Don Corneo, the most you get from him is he's like a weasel. He's he's a womanizer, trying to, all he cares about is getting in the bed with women. You don't really see how
he maintains control.
What reason are these people who are clearly more capable leaders following someone like Don Corneo? I even see there's a little snippets of them like kind of calling off the Dawn a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
But like I would have liked to see more in the story of like why would they follow someone like Don Corneo? Because he still acts exactly the same he does in the original, but we don't get like any like how he runs the wall market.
Well, and
I think it's
go
just
ahead.
his well, I was gonna say I think it's just his money. Like just he has just so much money compared to anybody else in the slums.
He's supported by
that-
Shinra too.
Yeah, and I think the prize money for winning that Coliseum tournament is like 1,000,000 gil. And apparently it sounds like he's just throwing these tournaments on all the time, you know, for his own entertainment.
Well, I thought the prize
Yeah.
money was the amount of bets that were placed by people in the crowd.
Well, Madam M knew that the prize money was going to be a lot going into it because she said, well, at least she said that was going to pay for the dress that
I guess
that
that's
Aerith would
true.
get.
I guess that's true that she actually knew. I guess I just figured that she figured, you know, just like in Las Vegas, oh, we know that these is going to bring in on average an X amount of money. So if I can just win that, then, but I guess that makes sense too, that he would throw in money there. That's why he added the Hell House fight, because he, you know, it's a lot of money on the line.
Yeah, so he thought that the Hell House would win and then he'd get to keep his money, right?
Oh, and speaking of which, I will say, now we're talking about the dresses. The cross-dress scene is greatly expanded on.
Yeah.
They brought a little more spectacle to it. Everyone was wondering if, you know, they would bring it into the game because Final Fantasy VII is supposed to be so serious. And they kept the comedic side of Final Fantasy VII intact. I appreciate it. I love the dialogue that Cloud gives on your way to the mansion. And like Eris is trying to talk to him and he won't talk back. And he's like, not a word. Or like when Tifa finally realizes it's Cloud, he's like, yeah, look, I look great. I look beautiful. All right, let's move on. Like I thought that was great. That was I even kind of like the dance sequence.
See, the dance sequence is something that I've grown to. Initially, when I saw it, I thought this is so over the top.
Yeah.
Right? Because in the original, you have the dress sequence, and as you guys remember, all you do is click these items, and then you put on a dress. Cloud's embarrassed. It's kind of funny, and you move on. And in this, I had a hard time buying the guy that wouldn't even high five Aerith is going to get on the stage and like shake his hips around, even if it's for Tifa. I just don't think that, you know, I was going to buy that. But having gone through the build up to Don Corneo, right? The fact that they couldn't even get in, and then the fact that they couldn't even get an audience with Andrea, and then finally they go to Madam M, and she's like, "Well, if you compete in the Coliseum," they go through the entire Coliseum thing. You see Johnny got busted up, like it's a terrible place, it's unfair rules. They finally win that, okay, and at that point, you've really clearly established that these people, Madam M, Andrea, Sam, who all have power over you, are all beholden to Don Corneo, right? It really kind of establishes the world that they're in, and like the kind of person Don Corneo is and the power he has. And I think at that point, to me, I was able to accept that, okay, Cloud, they even have a line where Cloud's like, I'm not sure this is a good idea. You go in here. I'm starting to think this place is worse than I thought. Like, I could kind of buy it that Cloud just reasoned that this is dire circumstances, but I'm willing to buy the dance scene, but I still think it was a tad too much, but I'm willing to buy it for the reasons I just gave.
I think the developers knew it was a tad too much and just wanted to add it anyways.
They just went for it, yeah.
You know, let it throw in the wall, see if it sticks.
Yeah.
There's one problem I had with the Don Corneo mansion, most
Okay.
definitely. Okay, so Cloud and Eris go and they allow them in the building. You know, Cloud's cross-dressed and everything, and they go into a room and they get gassed to wake up where Tifa is in the torture room. Why did they do that? They were already there for the Dawn, to sleep with the Dawn. So why did they need to get gassed? Just to be taken to another room and then escorted to the Dawn's room.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't quite make sense. If I had to guess, it was probably just because the Don may not be ready that night, so maybe they just felt that they needed to lock them in the dungeon. I don't know. Maybe they definitely could have expanded upon that, but if they could have just had a scene where the Don may want to get kinky tonight in the dungeon, but later changes his mind. But that is a good point. It was kind of silly to have them
They could have just
gas
been like,
other than
come down here, please, and
well,
we'll call you when we're ready, and you
the
can shut the door.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I guess the way I looked at it also in the moment was that they were being gassed so that they were unwilling to say no, which doesn't really tie into the fact that later they seem completely fine.
Mhm.
I mean, it
You know?
doesn't make sense because they're specifically get picked by the Don.
Mhm.
They
Yeah,
want to be there.
but they may not realize everything he wants to do. They
But
might
you're
be
already awake when you get there.
right. I don't know.
Unless it's like if Ares and Cloud or Tifa were more compliant to the Don's wishes and commands, they'll be like, oh, it's that gas. It's making us more, or like woozy in the head, and or something like that, or something like a roofie or something.
Right.
But no, it was just they wake up, they're completely fine.
Mhm. Yeah, it was odd.
But
Yeah.
I mean, besides that, the everything else was fine. I thought that was just a really weird thing they did.
All in all, I really, 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 really enjoyed the Don Corneo segment. I thought the actor was phenomenal, but the only thing that I was a little disappointed with is I thought the reaction to Cloud being a man was better in the original. Because in the original, he like jumps up and he's like all animated reaction, like, oh my God, this is a man,
Yeah.
But in this game, he's just like, oh, you're a man, huh? And then that's it. And I'm like, dude, you. I don't know. Maybe they just didn't want to lay it on thick because some people might get offended. But other than that, I thought it was great.
Wall Market is definitely one of the best parts of the game. I think this is where one of the best parts they expanded on.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
like 90% of it. Like this is what like a place ran by a slumlord would look like.
Yeah. It
Like
was,
it's got that like really poor looking Las Vegas um type of feel to it. It's like it's a place you want to go when you're desperate to get money or try to get somewhere. Couldn't make it in the Gold Saucer. Maybe you'll make it at the Honeybee Inn,
Mm.
something like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a really nice and shitty place at the same time. So it's really
just
cool they
gaudy.
they combine that
Right.
because even in the original, it doesn't really seem like a place. It kind of seems like similar to other sector slum areas, and there's not much difference between them except like if you go to the Honeybee Inn in the corner. But like here, they made it look all Yakuza like and everything.
Mm.
Yeah. It was great.
So
Stan,
greatly improved.
Did you have anything you want to add with the wall market segment?
Yeah. One of the you guys touched on pretty much everything, but one of the changes they made to the story is that Cloud is always the one who gets picked, right? Regardless of what you do. Like Tifa and Aerith can have the best dresses, and Cloud can have the worst one, but he always gets picked. And
Oh,
they
wait,
did that.
before you continue, do you know what triggers which outfit Tifa wears? Because I've seen other people's gameplay and she's wearing a kimono, and in my game she was wearing a Chinese dress.
I thought it's what you choose in chapter 2 when
Yeah,
she says, "What outfit should I wear?" and you get to choose.
Yeah, I think you
Oh.
have to do all the side quests in that early chapter, and then you get that scene with her in the apartment is like an optional. It's like an extra scene in which she asks you. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, I completely forgot about that. But anyways, what you were saying?
Yeah, so Cloud is the one who always gets picked, and the reason they did that is to have the scene where Tifa and Aerith get to beat up the goons, right? Which is like a silly and cheesy moment, but I actually thought it was really good, because if there's ever a point where you want to have like a scene where, you know, like the girls get to go wild and, you know, beat up these, you know, dudes, like that's the perfect scene to do it, right? And the music was like kind of very jolly and setting the tone right for like a, you know, like those guys in there obviously have it coming to them, right? The kind of guys that they are, you know.
Right.
And so that was like, that was the case where I actually like the idea that the game is always going to make it so Cloud is picked, so that you always get that scene with Tifa and Aerith. And then later on, in the padded out sewer dungeon, padded out is an issue, but you have some more scenes where Aerith and Tifa are kind of bonding, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was very important, so that the game is like, because in a lot of anime and love triangle situations, right, where if there's one guy and two girls, it's like the two girls will be at each other, right, knowing that they're competing for the affection of the male lead, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they put it in a different light where they're also friends, you know, like they're becoming friends themselves, and that just makes it like a much more interesting and less tropey, I guess you could say, situation, right, with that love triangle aspect. And the scene with the Dawn, like where they don't get picked and then they have to fight their way out of trouble, and then some of those scenes in the sewer dungeon are like key to that, because shortly after, during the plate sequence, they get separated, and they're separated for most of the game, right? So in the limited time they had together, they really kind of started hinting at that friendship that they have, you know, and started building that up like right away.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, keep going.
Well, I was just going to finish up and say, to do that, they had to make Cloud be the one who's picked, regardless of your gameplay choices,
mm-hmm.
right? In order to put Tifa and Aerith together and kind of start telling that story with those two characters, you know?
Well, I think, yeah, I agree. And I think that it really just is a more mature aspect of the exploring that dynamic. If they just had okay, we're both after Cloud the whole time, it would have been a little much, because you also had that with Jesse. Mm-hmm. And it just would have been a little tad too much. But this was a much more mature telling of a route they could have gone, because that's just realistic to the maturity of Tifa. She might have an interest in Cloud, but she's also an adult. And if she thinks that Cloud's a grown adult, if he prefers Aerith, then she's still his friend, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Aerith's new to the party. You know, she's not gonna be stomping over something that's already there. So it made a lot more sense. I felt like I agree with that.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, because you have such a small time window on Aerith and Tifa getting to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
And a reason for Tifa to believe that Aerith could go get Marlene for her. So maybe it is good that you get in whatever you can to get them to start being friends along the way.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I think it worked out for the better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just a totally sidetrack to a different thing that I enjoyed about the story here. The chaos after the first bombing reactor of the game. So basically the part after in chapter 2 that you go after the demo, this was new stuff that they didn't really explore in the original in this way, where you're walking down the road and there's just flames and debris and these NPCs, Jesus Christ. I mean, I found one NPC that was on the ground, bent over, just crying, right? Just bawling, crying. You have children that are like begging to their moms, scared. You have people telling their children, you know, it's okay. We're going to go here. We're going to go to your father's house. We're going to, like, you know, it was just very just gut wrenching, the amount of impact that they showed that blast had. It was kind of undermined, you know, with the fact that Shinra was behind it, but just adding this whole element to that with just showing us the damage done and not just telling us, I thought was just glorious for this game. This this put my expectations so high when I saw that chapter 2.
It gave better context because if you played the original game, there is a panic going on after after the reactor blows up, and there's NPCs running around everywhere panicking. But
Not like this.
exactly, not like this. Like they put a lot more context into it, and this is like, and it feels more realistic. Like this huge place just blew up, and it's just like Mako everywhere, and like a lot of these areas just lost their electricity and their power. They're all outside. They're wondering what's going on. Like this feels more realistic to how people would react in a situation like this.
Yeah.
And like I felt more bad for my actions after. I was like, bravo, they made me feel worse for blowing this thing up.
Yeah. The thing is, though, I have such mixed feelings too on that chapter because they added a bunch of new stuff, and the stuff that we're talking about is just glorious. And at first, I really appreciated the first Sephiroth appearance that we got because I thought what they were doing, and I thought this was added stuff that was just fantastic, was I thought they were showing PTSD from Cloud because he saw all these burning buildings, and it was bringing back trauma from him and Nibelheim. And I thought, oh my God, this is fantastic because this is exactly, this guy would have some serious PTSD from the crap he's been through, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's been a prisoner for 4 years. His hometown was completely destroyed. His mom was killed. He's just, his friend that rescued him, Zach, died. I mean, this guy would have serious PTSD. So seeing all this wreckage would just trigger stuff in his mind. So I thought he was having these flashbacks because of the events that he went through. And I was just like, dude, this is fantastic. This is exactly what I would have done. Even I wouldn't even thought of this, but like they're going to new directions that I even think of that are fantastic. Mm-hmm. I was buying the appearance of Sephiroth. I like, okay, like he's hallucinating. Sephiroth's at the core of this. If they have to put him in here, this makes sense. But then I find out at the end of the game that this wasn't PTSD. This was Sephiroth from the future trying to stall Cloud from getting to Aerith. You know? So it's just like, oh.
Yeah. They had it, right? They had it.
Yeah. It's just like, oh my God, that's so stupid. Yeah.
Yeah. Even in that scene, though, I think they, like, visually, I agree with you, and kind of the premise,
right?
Of, like, when it happened and why it happened was, like, spot on. But, like, the dialogue choices, not necessarily that the dialogue was bad, but the choices to have Sephiroth kind of taunting Cloud that he killed his mother with his sword, whereas in the original game, it's kind of implied that he was just killing recklessly and like he wouldn't even really know who Cloud's mother was at that point, right?
Right.
He shouldn't, like, that shouldn't be something that Sephiroth is really aware of or like took particular pleasure in doing, right? Because at the time of the event, Cloud meant nothing to him, right? Mm-hmm. Cloud was a nobody, wasn't important. Now maybe he's making that up, right, after the fact, to taunt Cloud in this moment, saying, I know I killed your mother and I enjoyed it or whatever sadistic kind of stuff. But then the other piece that didn't fit really quite right was Cloud says, I killed you, right?
He doesn't know, yeah.
Yeah, that he shouldn't know, because in the original telling of the story, at least his memory is jumbled, right? He only has fragments of what happened, and specifically the part where he confronts Sephiroth, he can't remember it anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I took it as just like, okay, they're kind of just retelling that aspect to where instead of not remembering what happened, Cloud will have a false memory of that he actually was able to defeat him and kill him.
Right.
Which is not quite as good, but I was like, okay, whatever, just roll with it.
Maybe.
And then, like you mentioned, or later on in the game, you come to realize, like, oh, no, that's not really the direction they took it,
But, Sephiroth from the future.
Think Sephiroth was dead in the original?
Yes. Well, he wasn't sure, but the
He
official
didn't-
reports were that he was dead.
Before the Shinra building happened, did he assume Sephiroth was dead or still alive out there?
He didn't know. Like he just had no idea. He didn't know how he himself survived because he didn't have the memory of that confrontation. So he didn't know where Sephiroth was. He didn't know
Right.
how he got out of that with his own skin intact. You know.
That's part of
And
the
so-
reason he's searching out Sephiroth is he doesn't remember what happened.
And so then when Sephiroth appears in the Shinra building, or he is sighted by Palmer, Cloud is like really itching to go after him. You know.
See, and this is the type of thing that particular scene that they added, it's once I realize what they're trying to do with it, it makes a little bit more sense because I was with you, Stan. Why is Sephiroth doesn't care about this fly Cloud.
Yeah.
He didn't even make it in Soldier. He wouldn't care about him. He would be up there taunting Shinra, just haunting him at night because of all the nasty things he did to him. So I was with you with that. But then once you realize, okay, this is the later Sephiroth that actually lost the Cloud. Okay, that's why he's taunting him. I get it. But it's just that doesn't make it better for me. that just doesn't. That makes it worse, So I have lots and lots of stuff I want to get into about the whole Sephiroth thing, but I feel that would be probably for the next controversial stuff they changed. But so I think that's all I'm going to say on that. But Eric, did you have something additional you wanted to comment on these whole Sephiroth stuff?
I think it was just a big mistake to show him.
Yeah.
Beginning game. I mean, have your time travel crap if you want, but the whole thing about what makes Sephiroth great was how things were led up to introducing him. And that's one of the most famous things about the game, and just completely botch it with the idea that everyone knows who Sephiroth is, so let's just add him at the beginning. This is screw the people who've never played 7 before.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have a couple things I want to bring up about the reveal, but I'm sure we all do. So, but I'm gonna try to save that for the controversial part, just in case we end up clipping this. But yeah, I didn't like that at all. One thing I did like though in relation to this was returning to Sector 7 to check for survivors after the plate falling. When I saw before, okay, I know that you have that odd moment where they're going to go rescue Aerith, but they stop and help people out. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about before that, where it's established that maybe Shinra will just let Aerith go. And Barrett looks at Cloud and says, I think we got bigger things to worry about right now. Let's go search for survivors, basically. I was like, this is excellent. This should have been in the original game because you actually go back to Sector 7, you see the amount of debris that's around, you see stuff on fire, and you're actually have an instance where you're pulling somebody out of the rubble. I thought that was just an excellent addition. Now, the original game, the amount of damage was way worse. You couldn't even get into Sector 7, but at least the fact that we were able to go back and see some of this, I thought was just a great addition to this segment. I mean, I didn't like the fact that everyone survived. Basically, that we knew. I thought that was kind of dumb. But just going back and being able to experience that firsthand instead of just kind of seeing it from a distance, I thought was great.
A great addition. I completely hated it. I hated everything about
that
it.
You had to.
It completely takes away the consequences of Barrett's actions, which are a very important part of the story and something that comes up later in the original game about all his actions have led to deaths of thousands of people.
I know. Okay,
and this version
is something different. I was talking about seeing the debris. I'm not talking about the people surviving.
But isn't that part of the whole Sector 7 thing? Is that people survived and we're going back to the debris to find survivors?
Well, I think that it would make sense. And even imagine 9/11. They had firefighters pulling people out of the rubble, but still thousands of people died. So I'm not saying that Barrett's going back to rescue every single person in Sector 7, but I thought it made from a story sense so much sense that you would go back to the rubble and just look for people that survived.
I don't think it makes sense. Just because that Sector 7 plate was basically throwing an entire mountain on a village. You crush a whole mountain on the village, you can't get underneath that mountain to find if anyone didn't get crushed by that mountain. Everyone died from that thing. Maybe you can find like a few small people outside of Sector 7 that may have survived or something, or like you may have had a character like Johnny or someone decided to come back, but he somehow made it. Something like that. But the whole Sector 7 at the beginning, I thought was supposed to be built up that we actually care about these people. We care about the lady who runs the apartment complex, the little girl with the cats,
so
or the people
totally
at the weapon shop.
Separate, but yeah, keep going.
We were built up to get in connection with these people. So when Sector 7 did fall, we would have a much more emotional impact. And that's what I thought it was. Because they recreated Barrett's scene where he is just slamming his fists up against the debris.
Yeah, that's probably the next part. But
they're so great with it. And I feel like they're being survivors, and you're even allowed to go back to something after a giant plate fell on it. There should be nothing you can walk through.
I don't think
there should be just a big plate blocking everything, period.
So I think that I need to sparse this a little bit. So there's several extremes we can go, right? And I think that they can go back and look for survivors, and there can be no survivors.
I can level with that, but
that's like, I'm not saying that Barrett's going back and he's rescuing everyone. I mean, they could have gone back and found a body of somebody that you knew. But the fact that they go back, that's the part that I'm talking about. The fact that you would go back, look for people you knew that may have survived that now don't have a home. I think going back and looking at that makes total sense to the story. But I agree with you that like the story impact of having basically everyone we knew survive except Marco, Cloud's neighbor, who's a Genova clone, or I don't know, the junk dealer or something like that. Aside from like characters like that, basically everyone survived. I agree was not the narrative choice I would have gone, but the fact that you do go back and just look, I think that part made sense for me, and I like that. So
if I were to execute that better, I would have had it where Barrett's having his little moment, panic attack, and then something happens and he accidentally crumbles through the ground, similar to when he went back to Sector 7. It should have happened there then. Cloud and Tifa go in, try to help him.
He's worried about his daughter.
And at the end, you find like maybe like Wedge. I'm sorry, who established or survived, and maybe you found like a few townspeople down there that survived. Like no one significant, but like Barrett maybe a little relieved that some people were smart enough to know this underground place. Like maybe the little girl knew about it and told Wedge, like, I have this little secret place I like to go to sometimes. And like they go under there, and maybe a few people survived that way. But they should have been like underground, this sector. So like we shouldn't have gone back and able to see a debris of Tifa's bar. Tifa's bar should be 100% crushed.
Again, I don't like that the debris is not as big as the original, but the fact that they went back is what I'm talking about. Not the fact that you can see the bar, not the fact that, there's buildings not being crushed. I agree with you. It's an entire plate. It should have been more damage. But the fact that they do go back, I do buy that they didn't immediately start searching for people right after the plate fell, because Barrett was worried about his daughter, and if I was me, I would be like, what? Screw everyone else. Let me find my daughter first. And then I'm going to go back and look for other people. But I mean, I think we're splitting hairs here. And I think that if we continue down this path, we're going to have to go into the next topic. I still have some other.
The one thing I'll say is that if we needed to do that, it should have happened right while Barrett was having a panic attack, not deciding just to go back. He should have been going back in there right after. Because if you have a daughter and that just happened, you're not going to someone's house and then going there if you think that your daughter may be crushed under there. Like, you're immediately going to try to find a way in there.
Well,
Get it, unless like some plot like forces you away from it.
but Cloud literally tells him, "I know where your daughter is."
Yeah, so that's his motivation to go back there, but to find more survivors, I don't know. It seems so messed up.
Okay. Well, I see where you're coming from. I feel like I have, if I keep talking about this, I'm gonna end up going into like the whole plate falling shit, and I still got. I feel like we're gonna start.
Just in general, I think
topics.
it takes a lot away from Barrett's story.
I feel you. On that point though, one other thing that I didn't like, or that was an addition, was the ghosts, the plot ghosts. They were not consistent, and it was most relevant here, right? So the idea, if you beat the game, is that the plot ghost or the time ghost or whatever you want to call them, they are always present to try to make sure that the timeline stays the way it's supposed to be, and any kind of change the plot ghosts are trying to fix. So we have Wedge, who mounts a rescue mission and saves a ton of people. This is directly a new addition that Aerith brings because she remembers, she has a flash of what's going to happen. It's implied, at least, that she knows. And she says to Wedge, "I would rather look back now knowing I did everything that I could." And Wedge mounts a rescue effort. It's implied that Wedge wasn't supposed to survive. So he mounts this rescue effort. All these people live. All these people live that were supposed to die. Presumably hundreds of people that were supposed to die. And the plot ghosts just let these people keep living. And all these people are going to have children and grandchildren, and I presume just really impact the timeline at some point, somewhere, in a big way. So that was just one example. I don't want to get too caught up in the fact that he mounts the rescue mission. I'm just giving an example that the ghosts would appear at times to correct the timeline, but other times they didn't seem to care. And I felt that that was kind of muddy and not handled well. And that was an addition that I don't think was necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So, go ahead. We're going to.
Yeah, I agree. The ghosts are very inconsistent in numerous places. There's also the situation where they are trying to make sure that Wedge dies during the plate falling sequence. Like, they're kind of swarming around him, and you get kind of a fake out scene where it looks like this piece of debris like directly fell right on top of him. Well, it turns out he survives. Well, then why didn't they just kill him in the underground lab? Why did they even allow him to live that long? Right? Because they were trying to kill him, right? They were trying to make sure he died in the plate sequence, and he didn't. So then they just allow him to live. But later on in the game, when Sephiroth stabs Barrett and he dies, right?
Right.
A ghost is able to just literally like fly out of his body and bring him back to life. So if that's the case, why didn't a ghost just, when Wedge survived the plate falling sequence, why didn't a ghost just fly in his body and kill him right there? Right?
Yeah,
if they have that kind of power to bring somebody back to life, but they don't have the power to like directly kill them, it's very, it's like you start having to
pick and
really
choose when you're going
question
to use
the
it.
consistency of the plot element or the character of the ghosts, if you will.
Yeah, they used it when it was convenient, and they didn't use it when it felt convenient, and that was the problem, because now you're sitting there trying to theorize. Well, I guess what are the rules for these ghosts? What's the world building? What kind of like limits do they have? Why do they choose one scenes and not others? Can there be some consistency here that will make this believable and not just, well, we wanted to have Wedge in here longer. We thought the fans would like that.
Yeah. So
there's no rules to these ghosts at all. It's like, okay, so they're good at preventing something from happening, but they couldn't prevent Barrett getting stabbed.
Yeah.
And then I don't know. I went over it in the last episode, but the ghost inconsistencies and inconsistencies in general are a major thing. Like we went over how like Cloud can barely jump or get hit through steel objects in the both the original and a lot of scenes when you're controlling the character. But during cutscenes, all of a sudden he knows how to jump up like half a building, cut through trains,
Yeah.
and like do all these like acrobatics off this debris while fighting the final boss in Sephiroth. It's like, which one is it? You keep pressing the AC button when it's convenient for you. It's like, this is. I mean, I get you want a cool, flashy fight, but I still think you have to stick to your rules. One or the other is fine. You want having children all over your FF7, fine. You want it to be like the original, fine. You've got to pick one. You can't have Cloud doing these amazing things. And it also comes to the question of power scaling. If you can take on Sephiroth at this level, then what's next?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I know what boss fights are ahead in the game. Like, can we take on the Midgar Zolom now? Like, why won't we be able to take on the Midgar Zolom?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a problem. It definitely is. Consistency is important, and it could have been better in this game for sure. So I agree with that. I don't want to sidetrack this from this, but I personally have one more thing I want to comment on. It's small, and I think that if we have anything else to add about additions to the story, we can just bring them up, and then we'll go on to the next topic. But I did not like that they added a tie-in to Final Fantasy 10-2 with Shinra.
Oh.
Like, okay, so for people that are not aware of what I'm talking about, in Final Fantasy 10-2, so the sequel, there's this little kid who's named Shinra who wears this mask, and he's an Al-Bhed, and he's really smart. He's into technology and stuff, right? And he comments that he can suck the far plane, like the spirits out. He thinks he can suck that out and make an energy source out of it. So Nojima and then Katase later start spreading this idea that Shinra, and at some point travels to this planet of Final Fantasy VII, and this takes place thousands of years beforehand, and colonizes the planet, and then descendants of that Shinra end up making this president Shinra, who we currently fight in this game. And it's so stupid, and people didn't like it, but they left an Easter egg in the museum. There's a photograph where it shows a character with the same mask on that's black and white, basically, from Final Fantasy 10-2. And that doesn't even make sense to me, because this is supposed to be a descendant of Shinra. Why is this one also wearing a mask? Like, it doesn't even make sense. And I just hate that they tied that together. And I hope that this is never mentioned again. It's just a fun Easter egg, and that's it.
Yeah, that would be the best case scenario. Yeah, I've never liked that theory or aspect of trying to tie the two games together. It's so dumb. But,
Yeah.
But they did establish in an interview that Final Fantasy X has no direct connections to FF7.
So, okay.
So, I mean, they can always change their mind.
Right.
Yeah, they're
Okay, that is. But they had no intention of linking the two together.
So, go ahead.
The Final Fantasy series is famous for making references to previous names or something. So they may have just called him Shinra just to make a little reference of Final Fantasy VII. Like, we get references to summons and everything all the time. So that's the way I took it as. But I guess some people took it a little more seriously.
Well, the problem is, and we covered this in an earlier episode, where Katase actually walked back this connection, and he said, well, no, that connection was mostly Nojima. That was Nojima's idea. That wasn't really my idea. I'm not really going in on one way or the other, but I think the reason it's been kind of controversial is because they added it into the remake, right? As opposed to it just being one of the other Final Fantasy theories that Squall is dead or anything else like that, that they actually added that element, that mask and that character into the museum. So the history of the planet. And so it's not necessarily a big deal, I guess, as long as they don't make a plot point about it. It's just kind of there and that's it. But it apparently is canon now. So
Oh, well.
yeah. But
Look forward to Final Fantasy X-3.
where they travel between planets.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, all right. So I just want to take a moment to let you all know about our media partner, RPGFan.com. They are a great source of RPG news, game reviews, and soundtrack reviews. And they also have multiple other RPG podcasts in addition to our own listed on their website. So they have Random Encounter, which is a bi-weekly podcast that just brings RPG news and general discussion. And then they have Retro Encounter, which has a deep dive into whatever RPG that they have covering right now. So right now they have Soul Blazer on there. They had Tokyo Mirage Sessions, Dragon Quest, Your Story, the movie, Nier Automata, Suikoden. I mean, some really great stuff on there. So make sure you go check that out. And also their YouTube page, they're starting to promote this. They've primarily been just reviews, like I said, since 1998. But their YouTube page, they're starting to put out more video reviews. We have Trials of Mana here, Final Fantasy 7 Remake. What's interesting about the 7 Remake is this is actual video footage from my playthrough of the game, and it's somebody else's review, so that's really cool. And then Fire Emblem 3 Houses Centered Shadows, that was also my gameplay, and then I provided the voiceover. It was somebody else's review again, but I provided the voiceover for that, so you can hear my voice on that. That's pretty cool. I did the Outer Worlds game footage as well, so a lot of cool stuff over here, but man, this Dark Crystal review was just awesome, by the way. So make sure you go check these out. But they're doing a lot of cool stuff, and I know that you all support us with watching our stuff, but we would really appreciate if you go over and check them out as well. And while I have you here, I want to point out that I said last week that I would be doing the mystery character segment, and that is coming back. But we decided that because this is a spoiler podcast episode, that we want to kind of wait until spoilers are over, so that way everybody can take part, because this mystery character segment is actually playing into giving you the opportunity to vote on which RPGs that we're going to talk about in the future. We're going to give you a list of RPGs if you take part, and you're going to be able to vote. And so we don't want to restrict that to people that only played the 7 Remake. We felt that wasn't fair. So we're going to pick that back up once we're done discussing the Final Fantasy 7 Remake in a spoiler fashion. So other than that, let's get back to the main podcast. Okay, so moving on to our next topic here. We went a little longer with the prior topic. A lot of stuff to cover there. So this one's going to be a little bit shorter, but we're going to talk about some of the controversial changes to the original that we have strong feelings about. I know Demosthenes, she actually asked a question about this also for us to kind of cover. So we're going to hit some of the controversial changes. I'm just going to go ahead and open us up here with one of the things that I really didn't like here. And that was this changing of the voice in Cloud's head, right? So in the original game, we had moments where the screen would flash white and Cloud would have a voice that would speak to him. And the general consensus among the fan base is there was a little bit of a confliction there between sometimes it was Cloud's true identity speaking to him, kind of trying to come out. And then it was also at times Sephiroth or Genova who was manipulating him. But there was this voice that was speaking to Cloud. And I felt that was important because it instilled in the player that there was something slightly off with Cloud. So it made the reveal that Cloud was just a puppet a little bit more believable, because something wasn't quite right with Cloud. And I like that, but they replaced it in the remake with these Sephiroth visits from the future and then story flashbacks. And I'm all about the story flashbacks, but the Sephiroth visits from the future, it just basically what I feel like is they cut something out that I thought was important to the original that I didn't appreciate, and replaced it with Sephiroth from the future. And I'm left wondering, in the original, am I supposed to believe Sephiroth from the future is also visiting Cloud during these moments? I didn't like it.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like you said, they in order to further emphasize kind of the new Sephiroth, right? Or Sephiroth acting in a different way, they kind of sacrificed that element of the original, right? In certain cases, like you said, not all the time. Sometimes it was pretty close to what it was, like when it was like when he falls through the church, and there's kind of like
Yes, that moment was good.
yeah, but the ambiguity was lost, right? They had to, rather than it being a voice that he heard, and you kind of wonder what it was answered. It was like, this time it was Sephiroth. This time it was his prior self, right? This time it was a flashback to Nibelheim, so like, because it was presented much more visually,
Right.
So
So there was that loss of, like you said, ambiguity. So
yeah,
I didn't like it. So I thought that if they would have kept that there, it would have been a little bit better of a reveal later on. And, you even have the moment where Cloud's retelling the Nibelheim incident, and Tifa says afterwards, how bad was I? Right? Where she even doubts herself, but that's because these flashes of white that go across the screen are not enough that she took note of,
yeah,
that like it was only a second or two. Whereas in now, Cloud's standing there and he's like, freaking out, right? For like a minute and a half with Sephiroth walking around, and Tifa's like, what's going on with Cloud? Whereas before it was only something you and the player and Cloud were experiencing. It wasn't something the rest of the party was experiencing. So could have done better with that.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean,
go ahead.
We all know the biggest controversy is that this game is actually a sequel.
Yeah. I mean, we covered that last episode.
We did. We did big time. Like I said, I'm interested to see where it goes, but I don't really appreciate that's what they ended up doing.
Yeah.
In the long run. But I mean, it comes down to a lot what you guys said. The early revealing of Sephiroth, didn't like the how people survived Sector 7, and we even went back to Sector 7. Me and Hat just had a conversation about that. I didn't care for that.
I'm in the minority here, but I hated the plate falling segment.
Oh no, I did too.
Okay.
They turned it, to be totally blunt about it, they turned it into a Michael Bay moment, right? Where it was much more about the action set piece of the characters kind of like narrowly escaping of an explosion, rather than catastrophic event that was like taking the lives of thousands of people. In how it was presented, I am aware that it was actually that thing, it was actually the horrible event.
This Helldive, hate them.
But in the way that it was portrayed as it's happening, it was much more of a action set piece type of presentation to it, with kind of like electric guitar music in the background, like very misplaced.
Yeah. Well, I thought that in particular, with like the electric guitar plays, music, and just that whole sequence with the plate falling and seeing Shinra with that music playing instead of the opera music, seeing Kate Sith's appearance. The world has not even established a cartoon cat, and you're introducing a cartoon cat in a very moving scene.
Player, I know why Kate Sith is there,
right?
Because that's Reeve looking at the situation himself, because Reeve was the one that was begging President Shinra to stop doing this, like, don't drop the entire plate. Yes. So he's using his Kate Sith doll to monitor and look at what just happened.
Sure.
So the people don't know that. Newcomers don't know that.
Yeah.
All they see is a little cat.
Yeah. But even so, real quick on that point, Reeve is in Midgar, right? There's no reason for him to be controlling the cat in Midgar, because he himself is in Midgar. They could have easily shown him like watching the plate be destroyed on TV, or like on his computer monitor in his desk, at his desk, and then just kind of like putting his hands, like in his head, like, oh my god, like how could he have done this? That would have been much more effective to actually show Reeve the person,
Right.
rather Kate Sith at
Yeah.
that moment has not been established as a character or a thing that we are even familiar with.
I've seen so many videos of people that have never played this game before, and they all remarked on this plate falling and being like, WTF, what's with the cartoon cat? It's just total diversion from anything, and it was totally unnecessary.
A terrible place for a cameo, like a pointless kind of
but the
cameo.
The thing that really bugged me about the plate falling, which is what I was really getting at, and I agree with you guys about just you referred to it as the Michael Bay type thing, but dude, the key moments I felt during this were mangled as well. I mean, because they were trying to support this time ghost plot, right? So when you approach Biggs, his death, he's literally circled in black ghosts. And then the next scene, Cloud's near him and he's dying. And the point here is that the ghost killed Biggs because he was supposed to die. And I thought it was way more effective that the plate falling killed, like Shinra killed Biggs, not the time ghosts. There was no reason for that. And then Jessie's death, you see a scene with her like throwing a helicopter at a grenade. She's fine. She's got some like witty dialogue. And then you see these ghosts come in and they're circling her, and then they move away and she's under some rubble. And again, the time ghost killed Jessie, not Shinra. And I'm just looking at it like, why did you do that? That was totally unnecessary. You didn't set up that at all. There's no reason for me to believe that things would happen any differently. This is a very dangerous situation with lots of people shooting at them. No matter when, they got there, no matter the butterfly effect, they still probably would have died. There was no reason for that. And I just thought that was just a terrible way to change the story. It did not support it at all. And if I can add one point to that also, even the death scenes with them, I had such a hard time with, because while it was well acted, it was very well acted, both Biggs and Jessie, they were just super corny. I mean, Biggs, his final death thing is he gives Cloud a thumbs up and says, "Good luck, Cloud," and then he dies. Right? With a thumbs up. What's that?
Or so we thought.
Well, let's not, hold on. As far as you know that he died, okay? And then Jessie, again, like her final reaction is to say to Cloud, it isn't polite to stare, and she fist pounds Cloud, and then she dies. Are you who fist pounds somebody and then dies? It's like, this is so stupid. And then the fact that it's rated teen, they can't even really show why they're dying. Like, I can't get a good grasp how bad off Biggs is he's just grabbing his stomach. So it's all being portrayed in the acting. This was just mangled in a way that I thought was not necessary. The original had them kind of injured. They couldn't really move. They could have had that in this game. You go back up to Biggs, you can talk to him, establishes he's not dead. He's just too injured to keep on going. And then that the plate falling is what kills him. Not having Jessie sitting there like fist pounding, like, "All right, guys, one last fist pound. Oh, now I'm dead." But so it had moments with Tifa crying that were moving, but it was just downplayed by just pure cheese, in my opinion. And so I was so disappointed with that. And of course, the time ghosts also stopped us from preventing the plate from falling instead of us failing to prevent the plate. It was the time ghost. And dude, it was total mangle of this entire scenario that I just did not like.
Yeah. I don't feel as strongly about necessarily the cheesiness aspect to it, but more so the kind of it being a little too Hollywood, in that like the characters are dying, but yet still I have so much to say, right? And like when somebody's like dying,
Yeah, they're just like, like they're just
yeah,
like, they're just
yeah,
dying.
they actually, yeah, they maybe get 1 or 2 sentences out and then it's over. And, like that's kind of how a death by injury like actually plays out, unless it's like um a kind of like a lingering wound or something, right? If somebody succumbs to something like that, but we're led to believe that these people were in, combat with guns and grenades and explosions going off, right? Those kinds of things, like if somebody's going to die from that sort of thing, they typically don't have a lot of time, right?
Right.
That is more so the part of those death scenes that bugged me more so, is that it was very Hollywood in its presentation, where like an important character is dying, but they have like 2 paragraphs of of dialogue to convey to the protagonist before they go, and it's like,
the dialogue wasn't even good though. I mean, it wasn't even good. I mean, Jesse's like, this is all my fault. I killed all these people. And at no point is Tifa or Cloud, if someone's dying, you console them, you tell them what they need to hear. You could have been like,
exactly.
well, Shinra was behind this bomb, so it's likely he was behind the other. So you don't need to worry about that. Instead, Cloud's like, you owe me a pizza. And then they fist. I understand that that was his way of trying to, be, hey, you're gonna live. But it was just like, it was totally unnecessary. The fact that they just let her just eat herself alive before she died, and guilt, without even bringing that up. And she, they didn't say, oh, we'll make sure your father passes on. Nothing. Just fist pound, go out. Terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. One other thing with this, though, just to keep us moving here, I know that I'm in the minority with this, but I did not like that scene with Barrett. When I didn't, and I'm going to tell you why. I thought for the first minute or so, it was fantastic. This actor is just killing this. It was almost giving me chills with him screaming Marlene, Jesse, Biggs. It was great. It was perfect. But it took 2 minutes and I went back and watched 2 minutes and 15 seconds for someone to say Marlene was okay. Hey guys, this is Het here, and I just wanted to interject at this moment and provide further clarification on my point here, because I think that this is a scene that most people probably are going to disagree with me on, and I felt that just providing that extra clarification here on what I actually mean is going to help out a lot. And I'm not trying to say that my point of view is correct, but I just want to provide clarification so that way I'm not spending my entire week trying to respond to comments, providing clarification, because I didn't do a good job of explaining what I meant. So I'm just going to show you all what I'm talking about here, and hopefully you can at least see my point of view, and that might help with the discussion on this if you so choose. So I'm going to show a few moments here of what I'm talking about, just to give context. So right here is going to be a scene where we see the initial moment that Cloud goes up the pillar.
Stop. Stay with Wedge. I'm going up.
Sure.
I'm going too. I can still fight. Biggs, they were shooting at me and
Wedge, please. Let Cloud handle it. Don't worry, I'll patch him up.
Hang on, guys! Help is coming!
Wedge, listen to me. You stay here with them.
Okay, so right there, or right here, we see Cloud going up to the pillar. He asks Tifa and Aerith to stay with Wedge. So it's clear here that Marlene has not been brought up. Cloud is not even thinking about Marlene. He may be, we don't know, they don't show us that, but he's more focused on the pillar right now. Now we're going to scroll forward, and we're going to show the moment that Tifa decides to go up the pillar. I think this is around 7 minutes of this video. All right, so let's watch this.
Go. Follow your heart.
Aerith, there's a bar in the center of town, Seventh Heaven. I need you to...
Get Marlene to safety, right? It's okay. I'll find her.
Huh? Can you take her to the bar for me, Wedge?
Consider it done. Now get up there and kick Shinra's ass.
Okay, so right there, that was a great scene. We see that Aerith knows who Marlene is. She says, go get her and get her to safety. She uses the words, go get her and get her to safety. Tifa grabs Aerith's hands and embraces her, and you can see the emotion in her eyes. She's very thankful for this. She turns to Wedge and asks him to show her where Marlene is located. And Wedge says, consider it done. So now Tifa can focus on saving the pillar, trying to prevent the plate from dropping. It's established that Wedge is going to show Aerith where Marlene is. Now let's cut to the moment after they fail, and you see the view screen with Aerith, and she says that she got Marlene out.
What do we do?
Nothing. There is nothing you can do now.
You can't do this!
Tifa! I found Marlene!
She doesn't say, go save your daughter. I'm sorry, I didn't do it. She says, Tifa, I found Marlene, and she's in front of the camera. And the prior scene that we just watched, she promised to get Marlene to safety. And in this one moment that she has with Tifa in front of the screen, she says, Tifa, I found Marlene. She doesn't say Cloud. She says, Tifa, I found Marlene.
Aerith!
Marlene! My Marlene!
Tifa recognizes what she says and says, Aerith. Barrett says, Marlene? My Marlene? This is the center of Barrett's world. Marlene. Somebody is saying that she found Marlene.
What did you do?
And remember, Tifa asked her to go get her to safety, and Wedge said he would show her. Consider it done.
With her.
Where are you?
I'm at the...
Sir, we're on. Your activities unwittingly brought you into contact with the Ancients, who is now back in our custody where she belongs. For this, you have my sincerest gratitude. Alas, the sector in which you stand has been condemned.
Ancient.
Run! You have to go now!
See, right here, Aerith says, run, you have to go now. She doesn't say, Tifa, please, I'm sorry, go get Marlene. I couldn't do it. She doesn't say, go get your daughter. She tells them to get out of the sector. Aerith says at the beginning, I found Marlene after Tifa asked her to get her to safety. And then now she says, get out of the sector. She doesn't say, go get Marlene and get out of the sector. Okay, now let's skip to the moment that is just awesome for the first half of it. And then it starts to wane on me a little bit.
Marlene. Marlene. Marlene! Marlene! Biggs! Wedge! Jesse! God damn it! God damn you! God damn you all!
Okay, right now, this is giving me chills. This is so well executed. Just the acting and the emotion you can hear in his voice there, and just the way the face is expressed, and you can see the pain and agony in his voice, right? But then the camera cuts to Barrett and Tifa that are just watching him punching the wall, okay? And at this point, I think this would be an appropriate moment for Tifa to walk up to Barrett and say, Barrett, there might be hope. I asked Aerith to get her Marlene out of town, and she said that she found her. I don't know if she's alive, but there might be hope. This is the center of their world. It's literally the thing they care about most, this little girl. Now, Tifa does walk up to Barrett here, but she doesn't say that. That's not the first thing she says. Again, right here, Tifa should be walking up to him and saying, I asked Aerith to find Marlene. She said later that she found her. She didn't say, sorry, I didn't do it. I couldn't do it. Please get Marlene before the plate drops. She said, I found her. But Barrett is still punching the wall saying Marlene. So this is the perfect time for Tifa to walk up and let Barrett know about this. It looks like Tifa's walking up to Barrett to tell him this. What does she say?
It was us. We did this.
So this guy's punching the wall, screaming about his daughter, understandably, just killing it in the acting department. And we're still not bringing up the fact of the scenes we saw prior. It's just very weird to me that we still have not brought up what Tifa asked Aerith to do and what we just saw on the view screen. This is a great scene, by the way. It's just, I think this should have came after Tifa brought up Marlene.
No, you can't think like that. Whatever came before it was Shinra that pulled the trigger today.
Great line.
Am I right?
Just killing it right now.
Yeah.
Great acting.
Hold on to this anger, okay?
We still have not said anything about Marlene, his own daughter, who was referenced just in the scene prior with Aerith responding to Tifa's request. Keep in mind, Cloud has no idea about this.
Barrett. Marlene's fine.
Let's think about what we know here. So, Cloud did not witness Tifa ask about Marlene. He has no idea. He went up the pillar. Tifa asked later. So, why is Cloud able to connect the dots, but Tifa, who literally saw Aerith say on the screen, I found Marlene, in relation to her request, and we saw that moment where Tifa embraced Aerith, that this meant the world to her, that Tifa didn't bring this up earlier. This is the center of their world. It's literally the thing they care about most, this little girl.
Aerith found her.
Aerith. Is that the girl they took?
Yeah. That's her.
What the hell's going on?
I asked Aerith to find Marlene and take her somewhere safe.
Like, why isn't this brought up earlier? Okay, so that about wraps that up. I'm not saying that I didn't like this scene. I just felt that it was great until that moment. It felt awkward to me that Tifa walked up to Barrett, and instead of saying, I asked Aerith to find Marlene, she said she found her. So there's hope. She says instead, we did this. Perfect line, but not at that moment. Now back to the podcast. I thought it was like that. They were dragging this moment out with Barrett for so long without obvious information that was presented to them. And it really just felt completely like out of tone. It felt tone deaf to me. I like the first part, though. The first part was great.
I actually feel the opposite.
Yeah.
I think it was the best scene in the entire game.
I thought the acting was brilliant. And like I said, the first minute of it was just gut wrenching, but it just not presenting that information and instead choosing to blame Barrett more. That's me. I like the first minute. So
Yeah. Oh, well. All right.
I
disagree.
And I feel like if you're but those are two things that I thought were controversial that they changed. I mean, Hojo telling Cloud he was a Never-End Soldier. That was obnoxious. They didn't need to do that.
In general, yeah, that whole plot point I think was a controversial change. Not just him telling him, but also the constant like head grabbing. There's something not quite right with this guy. Going underground to the secret lab, and then at the end of that segment, you see a bunch of containers with like test subjects inside of them, and then Cloud has another like headache, and he imagines himself in the container, right? Like they really botched the setup for that aspect of Cloud's twist, right?
Mm-hmm.
That he was never in Soldier, to the point where, yes, it culminates with Hojo just letting the cat out of the bag completely.
On top of that, I really hate Zack is shown.
Yeah.
That's controversial in itself. We're not supposed to know about him yet. What Zack is super detrimental to the plot twists and reveals that come later in the main story. Like, people should, like, newcomers should not know who Zack is until way later in the story. I like how the original sprinkles and hints certain things about him, but and even this game did that to an extent. Like with Eris and Cloud talking on top of the playground slide and stuff like that. And do they just plan on just full on having him in there? And they're again assuming we've played the original game, so we already know everything about this. It's like, it's not safe for newcomers. Like, that's why I go back and like just heavily tell people now, like, play the original before engaging with this new series, because they do not care about those big pivotal moments of the original game. They're ready to spoil it for you already.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I see lots of people that have never played the game before that were wondering who Zack was, so they Googled it, and now the entire game is just spoiled, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it's not spoiled in a good way. It's spoiled as in they read a Wikipedia paragraph about it, which is not nearly as powerful. So that was not a good choice, in my opinion. Also, the only other thing I would bring up about this is a separate issue that was controversial was Shinra being behind the bombing of the reactors. I said after the demo that I could buy it if they were going to tie this into Wutai and, you know, really flesh that out, but they didn't really flesh out the Wutai stuff enough. Like, I really don't even know really why the conflict started, other than they mentioned they were jealous about the reactors. And I mean, it seemed like they also set this up so that you would have a character plot point with Jessie because she felt guilty about it and she wasn't actually at fault. But they didn't do anything with that plot point either, because Jessie never got told that it wasn't her fault. So,
on top of that, we never meet any significant character from the other Avalanche. We just see that they come and save the day.
Right.
Their military group, but we never meet any significant character or see Jesse, Biggs, or Wedge deal with the consequences of their actions, because that Avalanche opposes the ideologies of Barrett's Avalanche. So you would think that they would come into conflict more, since they've been added to the game now. After this mission, that Avalanche is never seen or mentioned again.
Well, they They tried to tie them into the Shinra building where they have the helicopter to try and help you escape.
Yes,
Right.
there is.
Yeah, Mayor Domino's in contact with them. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're fleshed out a little bit, but a little bit more would have been definitely preferable.
But more the point is that Jesse Biggs and Wedge did not receive any severe consequences for getting into conflict with them. So we don't really get much out of them. We don't establish the opposition between Barrett's Avalanche and their Avalanche.
Oh, because they rejected them. They said that they were too
radical.
Right.
Yeah.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
So we don't get that conflict. We just see them come time to time, or they may assist once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I agree with that. And just I guess that just whole component of just the multiple avalanches, you know, getting more time with them. And then also just the propaganda piece was great with Shinra being behind everything. It was just, they didn't really do anything with Shinra being behind the first reactor. I think it would have been better still if that had actually been Avalanche, because like I said, Jesse's character arc was kind of abandoned with that, and they didn't really flesh out the Wu Tai conflict, which they were tying Avalanche to. So all in all, slightly mishandled in my point, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys have anything else controversial that you wanted to address? I guess the Sephiroth reveal, we've already talked about that extensively, but we didn't like it.
Yeah. We also touched on the Trail of Blood sequence essentially not being in the game. Let's be honest. Right. It was in the game.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, and people will say like, well, you've got the Genova Trail or whatever. It's like, that's not what I'm really talking about. I'm talking about the whole sequence of being captured by Shinra, put in the cells, you know, waking up and finding that it's open, right?
Mm-hmm.
And have more of that like, you know, creepy horror vibe atmosphere that was just missing. And they essentially replaced it with another long dungeon where we were already at the climax, right? Like, Cloud confronted Sephiroth or found that was probably one of the clones, right, posing as Sephiroth, right, since all the other characters could see him as well. So that was like we're building to the end of the game, right, and then they get dropped into a dungeon for another, you know, hour and a half.
It would have been nice if they
then have to go back up to that moment, and it just didn't work.
Yeah, it would have been nice if, because they're removing that reveal, I don't like that fact, and I do, you know, like some of the stuff they did, but it would have been cool if they were actually, since they actually showed Shinra, Sephiroth killing Shinra. I didn't like that, but if they were going to show it, it would have been cool if we got some dialogue exchange between Sephiroth and President Shinra, because we never really had that in any of the games that I can remember or recall. And so I would imagine that Sephiroth would have some words for President Shinra, and it would have made me feel a little giddy just to see President Shinra acknowledge Sephiroth, because in the original game, he brings up Sephiroth all the time, the Cloud, like, oh, you weren't another Sephiroth. You weren't worth me remembering. So it would have been cool if we had that kind of reverence. So
I agree. Do that, or keep it exactly the same as it was, because with the added kind of screen time and presence that President Shinra has in this game, if you kept that Trail of Blood sequence exactly how it was, it would have been even more powerful, right?
Yeah.
Because the President himself is shown to be more, like he's just on screen more, portraying this kind of untouchable guy, right?
Sure.
So, yeah, either way, like if you want to expand the kind of Sephiroth's character and show what he would say to President Shinra, do that. Otherwise, should have left it exactly the same.
Yeah.
I agree.
So as far as controversial changes go, those are probably the biggest ones that I have. Do you guys have anything else you want to bring up here? that we haven't touched on for controversial stuff that was changed?
I think we hit all the big ones. Yeah.
I mean, we did an entire episode on the ending. Clearly, that was a big one. So
Yeah, that's its own discussion. Yeah.
yeah, that's a new level of controversy. So, all right, well, let's move on to the next topic here. All right, so now we're going to be discussing here, what did the Final Fantasy VII Remake get really right about the Final Fantasy VII original game? What components that we felt were just well done and keeping with maybe the spirit or the just feeling we got of playing the original. And there's a few things that I got here that I thought they did really well. The biggest one that I really liked was the Aerith's mom, Elmira, when they do that whole retelling of how she adopted Aerith. That was almost note for note the same as the original. And that was perfect. There was a slight change in dialogue where she says about Aerith's mother dying. She says, you saw that a lot back then. Whereas in the original game, it was, you saw that a lot during the war. And I think I preferred during the war a little bit better. But other than that, like, I felt that whole sequence, they really knocked it out of the park. And I thought that was very well done. That was everything I wanted.
I think everything from the original, and they recreated those scenes from the original, I think were pretty spot on, because the characters, I think, were all done right. They're very respective to their original. They really nailed Cloud this time. Cloud's had a lot of trouble through his Advent Children years. A lot of people didn't understand how he worked. They finally nailed him this time. So that from the original translated really well. And like I said, all the scenes translated greatly. And I'll give one example. When you climb the stairs in the Shinra building, it's almost just like it was in the original. And I think they actually did better on that because Cloud's still being relatively quiet. Barrett's complaining the whole way up, and Tifa's just scolding him for complaining while going all the way up there, because she's like the most, I guess she's like the most acrobatically fit of the three. So she has the easiest time climbing those stairs. Of course, Cloud has like a big Buster Sword on his back, so he kind of has an excuse. Barrett has a big gun arm too, but I think they like recreated that scene beautifully. Like, they understand I think they legitimately understand what made those scenes in the original great, and I think they translated them beautifully. It's just the stuff they added and filled in is the stuff I really don't like.
I agree.
In the game, but story scenes from the original just nailed it.
Yeah,
I have very little complaints about that.
One other thing that I agree with you just entirely. I mean, that they just really, the stuff that was consistent with the original, they just made it even better. But from a game design perspective, I felt like they really kept that messiness of the world, like the broken down cars and just like the debris that's sitting on the ground and just the messiness of the slums. That's PlayStation 1 era and Super Nintendo era detail that kind of got abandoned in the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3 era for these silky smooth countertops and, perfectly paved roads with no imperfections, right? Whereas in the PlayStation 1 era, they would have pre-rendered backgrounds with just like so much little details and like just crap like all over someone's desk and stuff like that. And this really brought that back. There was some texture issues, of course, but I thought they really got that design philosophy down. Perfect. NPCs were just basically Final Fantasy 15, but NPCs, I thought, but the actual world design was really well done and in keeping with the original, I thought. So I liked that a lot.
Yeah, I agree that the attention to detail in the environment was really good.
Yeah.
Other than the texture issues that you mentioned, which I'm guessing will be patched out at some point, like a quick fix or fixed in some kind of PlayStation 5 version of the game, where
I mean,
maybe
most of the
memory is less
places
of an issue.
Most of the places look so good that the low texture sections didn't particularly bother me.
Yeah,
I saw
me
them
either.
like everyone else, but I was like, whatever.
Didn't bother
Yeah.
me
Like
at
these
all.
are smaller, more insignificant places. I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
Like the places that are important that make it look right do look right. Like most graphically impressive thing in the game, I think one of them is the airbuster fight.
Oh yeah.
Like that was beautifully translated over. Like you feel that action when you first played FF7 back in the 90s. It was really intense doing that airbuster fight with the boss theme coming in. Beautifully translated, and that's like that. I think that's definitely one of my favorite boss fights. That and Rufus.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Those are great translations.
Yeah,
from the original.
I agree. Entirely agree.
Mm-hmm.
One other aspect that I really enjoyed was the humor in this game. The original Final Fantasy VII was very funny, and I was surprised that most of this humor landed, and I think that's probably due to the localization, because it's just I was cracking up so many times, even with moments with some of the NPCs that you could miss, and some of their dialogue was hilarious. I remember on the top plate, there was one moment where I was passing by these two guys, and there was one NPC. He was talking to this guy who was a Shinra employee, and he was saying, "Oh, I can't believe I bragged to all my friends that one of my friends is a worker at Shinra." And the guy's like, "Oh, yeah, it's not that big of a deal." And then he just keeps going on about how much he just adores the fact that, you know, he's friends with somebody that works at Shinra. And he's like, "One day you're going to be president of Midgar, and I'm going to be friends with you. Remember that time we went to Wall Market together?" And he's like, "Oh, don't bring that up to my wife. Don't bring that up." And like, it was just, I don't know, man. Like I was just laughing so many times in this game, and I didn't expect them to get the humor right. I thought it was going to be cringy, but they got it. They actually got it. I felt like, so that was a really good job. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. There's a lot of moments like that. Also, like the two guards down in Sector 7 that are kind of guarding the gate towards the next sector, and you've got like the kind of stern, older guard, and then like the inexperienced one, and he's like struggling to give like a command right to Cloud to like, "Hey, don't step back, don't come any further," right? And just their little dialogue back and forth was funny. And then there's another moment with they're like I think they're evacuating in chapter 4. They're like evacuating the or Avalanche and Cloud are leaving the facility where Jesse had to go to get the explosive device or whatever, after the Roche fight and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And like an old woman out on the street, like, who's saying like she wants to get into action or whatever, and there's this guard like trying to say like, "Oh man, please step back."
Yeah, man, this game is just hilarious, and I think that's a lot of the charm of the original. There, that the low level workers, the people working on this, the people that probably would have preferred a consistent retelling of the original, but they can't. They're not in decisions to make those kind of story changes. They're not Nomura, but they really captured that. So I thought that was really cool.
They're like, "All right, guys, we're at the end here, and we're glad there's some changes we had to make, but I'm glad we finally made the end of it." Just more to bust open the door. It's like spooky ghosts, timelines, belts, now.
Well, the idea that Nomura was going to direct Kingdom Hearts 3 and Final Fantasy 7 Remake at the same time, and there wouldn't be some overlap.
Then he chugs his cold medicine.
Yeah, I thought the music was really good also, and really consistent with the original. For the most part, there were a few tracks that were a little bit of a departure, but I was surprised how much the music got to me and how much it reminded me of the original. And I really appreciated that. So
like when they took the original track and decided to just modernize it or present it in like a cinematic or orchestral way. Like I think they nailed it. Like you mentioned, there were a few times when they're like, let's take this track and completely change the genre of it. You know, that was like, I don't know about that, but you know, I agree. Like for the most part, the music was pretty faithful and very enjoyable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no real complaints about the music. There's some tracks I like more than the others. Like, I like the song "The Oppressing" itself. If you listen to the track by itself, but I felt like it kind of defeats the purpose of what the song is supposed to represent, of like the oppressed people.
Yeah,
and it's got that, and they added that techno beat to it. Like, it's a good track by itself, but the purpose of the track was to represent the oppression of the people in Sector 5 and stuff like that. I was like, all right.
Yeah.
But then you get like awesome versions of the boss fight, and like I like the chase sequence, like on the motorcycle. That was a really awesome version of it.
Yeah.
So I like 95% of it, pretty much.
Yeah. And even the stuff that didn't fit, I still felt like I might listen to this. Outside of this game, it just didn't fit, right? So all in all, it was really, 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 really good.
How did you feel about like the how they did One Winged Angel?
I loved it. I didn't like that this was happening at this point in the game.
Yeah.
But as a track,
Can we talk about just the track itself and how it was used?
Yeah.
And
I loved it.
And the tone of it would change depending on the phase of the boss fight you're in.
It was fantastic.
I thought that was really well done.
Yeah. Entirely agree. It was, you know what it was, man? Like, if you look at Final Fantasy 15's music, 15's music was great, but it was all over the place. You would have parts where it was like mandolins playing, and it felt almost as if it was a soundtrack from a bargain bin at Walmart. And then later you would have big techno beats, right? That would feel very displacent from what you just heard. And then it would have orchestrated moments, and it didn't really tie together, probably because the theme of the game changed so many times over a period of time. Whereas this just felt mostly very cohesive, mostly because they were sticking to the original, but even the expanded tracks, it really added to the feeling that I was supposed to have in this game. And, the sense of excitement, but also the just sheer depression that you're supposed to feel with the circumstances these characters are in. And just, well done with the music. Well done. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up about what they did really well in the remake that was in keeping with the original? We brought up a lot of stuff in the other topics also. So it's not that we don't have other stuff to say, but I mean, do you guys have anything that, maybe we failed to mention? I mean, I like the presentation of the Turks. I thought that was good, right? President Shinra was good. So some really just characters were good. So, but anything else you guys want to bring up?
Just like you mentioned just now, the characters, pretty much all of them except for Sephiroth and Aerith at times, because of the whole sequel nature of and how those characters are tied into that. Point that they behave like very differently at certain points. Mostly Sephiroth, but also Aerith at times.
I did at least appreciate that Aerith was just like she was in the original.
Yes.
Until up to that point, because also with Cloud and Advent Children, Aerith has also gotten abused pretty badly. In the compilation, always acting like a holier than thou, holy mother type persona, when she wasn't really known for that until like the very end before what happens.
That moment in the game where she's leading Cloud to her house and she jumps and she like something breaks and she falls and she yells, "Shit."
Yeah.
I love that because like you said, Eric, in the original game, she was, or in some of the other entries, she was just this holy woman that could do no wrong. And she couldn't, the idea of her cursing is just So baffling.
Yeah, like people are realistically a product of their environment, right? And she's lived most of her life down in the slums, right?
Right.
She's not gonna be like this kind of like, like people
Saint.
are not parting the crowds as she like walks through, or like holding her in like such high regard or something, like how she's portrayed in the kind of in the compilation, as like this angelic kind of character. It's Jesus grew up on the streets,
Yeah, and she's supposed to be kind of like the opposition of Tifa, where you would think like someone like Tifa would be more outgoing, like based on her design. Tifa's actually a more conservative character and keeps to herself type of deal. And then you have Eris, who looks like a more conservative type character, like keep to herself type of thing, and she's the outgoing one. She's the one that's always getting Cloud in trouble.
Yeah, very playful, likes to tease Cloud a lot. Yeah.
So it's very interesting that they, at least in the original game, they intentionally designed both of them like that, and kind of throw like the opposite kind of personalities at them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Since we're
very well. I was just agreeing. Yeah.
Since we're kind of already on the characters, we had another topic we're going to bring up with the favorite character, and I just want to take a moment to just kind of address Barrett's character real quick, because I wasn't sure about the character initially, whether or not I was going to like him, but I think that he's probably my favorite character by the end of the game, and mostly because they were able to take that character arc that he had in the original game, where he had this retrospective look on life and that he changed his outlook that, okay, I was in the wrong. And while he didn't completely have that here in this first game, they were able to recreate it in a different way that I thought was really good. So as an example, right, in the beginning of the game and through most of the first half of the game, Barrett keeps giving these speeches about what they're doing with Avalanche. And he's using these really unethical arguments. Like he'll say things like, an innocent man who serves a crook still has blood on his hands, right? Or stuff like that, where he's just basically saying that no matter what we're doing, Shinra's worse. It doesn't matter. These people that are serving him are just as bad. And over the game, they start to show subtle signs of him cracking a little bit, because the first moment I remember is when he realizes the people in the slums are buying the propaganda that Shinra's spitting out, that Avalanche is responsible and Wutai is connected with them. And he realizes that, well, it's not their fault. They're being lied to, right? So he's not like, they're going along with Shinra, but it's because they're ignorant. It's not because they're bad. And then later in the Shinra Tower, we have the elevator scenes where he's seeing real people and he chooses not to kill them because they're just innocent people, right? And like he's slowly changing till the point where we get to that final, and I'm going through points here fast because I know we're going long here. When we get to the little museum thing where you're seeing basically the propaganda of how Shinra's saving the planet, and Barrett says this is a bunch of propaganda BS, that Shinra's making people's lives better, and Cloud responds, but it's true. Mako did make people's lives better. And Barrett responds, at what cost? And then he says, and I used to buy this propaganda BS, and it angers me, right? In that moment, I felt that like Barrett actually identified with the people that he was previously earlier in the game saying that they're just as bad as Shinra because they're going along with it. But then he acknowledges, I used to be one of those people. And you kind of see this pay off when you have that confrontation with President Shinra, and he chooses not to kill President Shinra, which shows he's a bigger man, right? It shows who's really more evil. And I just like, I had a hard time initially because trying to piece this together, because I didn't like that they changed the character arc of Barrett a little bit with the Shinra being behind the Mako reactor bombings. But I still really liked that confrontation with Shinra, and I was trying to figure out why until I realized all these scenes were just building up to that payoff. And I just thought like they did an excellent job with that character.
Yeah, they really balanced Barrett really well. I was worried that like they were going to make him too dumb, or they're going to make him like too over the top, or actually make him too serious. And I actually think they found a good mix of everything, because there are times when Barrett acts like a goof, and such, especially when the Barrett, Tifa, and Cloud dynamic between the three. I think that's like the best banter in the game between them three. And you would think to yourself sometimes, is Barrett incompetent? But then you get scenes where where you believe that he's a leader and he believes in his cause. And it's not like just a farce to get like attention or something. Like he legitimately believes that the planet is dying from these mecha reactors. Sorry. And they make sure you remember that, like in between like his type of character. And you would think to yourself for a second that might be inconsistent, but for some way they found to make it all seem all natural together with Barrett. And I'm very impressed they pulled that off, because I really think they were going to Flanderize him a bit and just give him I'm the over the top, I like to shoot things guy, but he really isn't. He's definitely not a one note character.
Yeah, I agree. For the reasons you all listed, I think he's my favorite character as he's portrayed in this game, in the remake. And it's interesting because when the game was first revealed, or kind of re-revealed, and we actually got to hear some of the voice acting, I remember most of the response to that was like, oh, all the characters sound great, but I'm not too sure about Barrett, right? That's what everybody was saying. And now here we are, the game's out, and most people are like, no, Barrett is the best, or one of the best, voice acting characters after all,
Because as much as I think they nailed Cloud right, they understand Cloud. They let him loose once in a while. They don't make him too serious or too reclusive or anything. So as much as they got Cloud right, I actually personally thought that it was going to be harder to get Barrett right. And like I just said, I think they got him spot on. So I agree with both of you. I would probably make Barrett my favorite character of the group.
Yeah. Agreed. I also, one little slight thing with him also is I really enjoyed all the moments that he had with his daughter, and him reciting things from the coloring book, and just any scene with him and Marlene was just perfect. So fantastic.
I thought that scene, with him talking to Marlene, that he has to go out and save Eris and stop the bad guys and everything, like that was a good emotional scene for me.
Yeah. Really well done.
Yeah. So, was there any other characters or anything else you wanted to bring up about stuff they did well with the original game before we move on?
I mean, just in general, I think they did a really good job with almost every character from the original. I definitely had my problems with President Shinra at the end of it, but until that point, I thought they even did him very well. Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse. I thought I was going to hate Wedge, but they ended up pulling him off pretty well. Also, the Breaking Bad voice actor, I think, actually did him pretty good.
I liked him, but I think they went a little too far in certain scenes. For example, when he was rescued, right, and he was almost dead, you go up to his bedroom in Elmira's house or Aerith's house, and he's asleep, and he's like, "Oh, hamburgers." I was like, come on. There's more to this guy.
Of course, he's the fat guy, so you got to bring that up once in a while. But I mean, then there's that scene too where they pull his pants down to check his injury on his butt.
I ended up liking him. I liked him a lot, so it was fine.
He was a good comedic relief, and he didn't ruin any scenes that were supposed to be serious.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I think they balanced that also. Jessie was a little bit of a horn dog the whole way. Like, I know she flirted with Cloud a little bit in the original, but she was full on, like,
thirsty.
Like, She was she was spreading the legs for him, man. She was like trying to get any opportunity to flirt with him.
Yeah, well, it's also implied that it's an act, right? Because Wedge tells Cloud at one point it's all a game to her. Don't fall for it, right? And then she's also like saying like psych, right? Yeah. Well, like maybe they should have clued the player into that a little bit earlier, right? Like before all those kind of hammy moments, But
Right.
yeah.
Well, the thing is, if you think about it, you don't know. I mean, to Wedge, it might have been all an act. He might have got burnt, but she might not. He might not be her type, so that's his interpretation of it. Whereas Cloud's this super muscular guy, army guy that was, kind of maybe more her type. So it might not be an act. She might really be into him. We don't know.
On top of that, Cloud's hard to play. I imagine Wedge isn't as hard to play.
Right.
That could be the case. That I didn't think of that, but I took it as it was like she was messing with him, and also plays into the fact that she's like an aspiring actress, right? Like that's the whole point. She's like trying to make him fall for her and like kind of playing the part, right?
It could also be her way of just loosening Cloud up and trying to keep him around, because Cloud and Barrett are very opposing at the beginning, and Barrett just wanted him out, and I think Jesse's trying to finding a reason to keep him in, so she's just kind of playing with Cloud, and while maybe she could convince Barrett to just keep him in.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll find out in part 2, because apparently she might be alive. Although I still think that's the other timeline.
We know Wedge and Biggs are, but if they're both alive, she's got to be alive too.
Yeah.
There's just no.
She's too popular.
Most likely, yeah.
And she's the most liked of the three. So
yeah. Cool. Well, I think that rounds that topic up. They did a really good job with the characters, so I think that basically summarizes everything. So let's move on. All right, so for our next topic, we're going to be talking about what we could have done to improve the game, or what they could have done to improve this remake or this sequel, whatever you want to call it. And I'll go ahead and start us off here and just say that I thought some of the added story elements were great. So in particular, I'm talking about 2 moments with Leslie and that whole side sequence with him finding out about his girlfriend or whatever, and she never sees her again. I thought that was interesting. And the stuff with the ghosts and, exploring some of that with rescuing the ghosts in the train yard and seeing some of that backstory was great. But I also thought that this would have been much better as side quests if they could have incorporated it in that way. And that's the level of Witcher 3 side quests that you have, that, you go on a side quest and it has story content of that caliber as the side quest. And given those things weren't really pivotal to the main plot, I thought those 2 moments would have been better as a side quest. And if they could just have more stuff like that, where you have these characters and you go on a whole story tree of finding stuff out, that would have helped with the just the padding feeling, right? Not have those moments, but have it be optional, but also have it rewarding, so that if you do go on it, there is this added story content that fleshes out the world. I thought that would have been an improvement to the game. I
absolutely agree with you. And that actually, your point actually adds on to my point on how to improve the game, is that first of all, what you said should have been side quests. You could take a lot of padded moments of the game and make them side quests. But like I said, if they would have trimmed down the dungeons, it's about a 30 to 40 hour game, depending if you do everything or not.
Right.
I would have taken a lot of that fluff out, and I would have made it a focused 20-hour story. Because if there's something this game lacks, it's focus. And it makes you go off to the side a lot of times when it's not appropriate to do so. And that takes you out of the game. It takes you out of the story. You start forgetting what's going on about the time. So if they just cut a lot of the fat out, I think it would have been a really damn good 20-hour experience.
Yeah, definitely. The pacing was a huge problem. The the thing that popped out to me the most was of what could have been improved the most with, in my opinion, not much effort, right? I mean, trimming down the game to 20 hours is probably more important, right? But in order to like building like a more focused game, but the side quest design in this game was pretty poor. I mean, I think it's fair to say we're all in agreement on that.
Right.
And one thing that stuck out to me is that these side quests are essentially very similar in design to side quests that you see like in Xenoblade Chronicles, for instance, right? Go to this area, kill X amount of this monster, or roam around the map, find these 3 things, and bring them back to me, right?
A 10-year-old game.
Yeah,
That was
that's essentially
criticized
the
back
side.
then.
Yes, but in Xenoblade Chronicles, it's not nearly as bad because they make those side quests kind of as a part of exploring the environment, right? So you arrive at a new environment, you're immediately given these side quests that you can ignore or complete, and you can complete them naturally as you play the game anyway, right?
Right.
You're not really going out of your way, and so those menial tasks don't feel so cumbersome, right, to complete. Whereas in FF7 Remake, you've already explored this area, and now the side quests are being given to you as a way to linger in this area longer, essentially, right? Spend more time in this place that we've built, for you to explore, rather than, well, I'll explore this place as much as I prefer to, right?
Sure.
So the way I would improve these side quests is either you have to do a better job of tying them into the story, right? Which they did in some cases with like the angel of the slums and
Right.
like the reporter guy, like the Shinra news informant guy.
Yeah, that was a good side quest because that did offer world building.
See, to me,
so
okay, I'm sorry, I was going to get us on a tangent. Keep going.
Yeah, I was just going to say they did have some success with doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then like there's the rats, right? Like go kill these rats, right? You come back, it's like, oh, actually those weren't the right rats. Now the real rats are there in the same place, right? Go back and do it again. I don't know if you guys remember, but like I made a joke like when we first found out about these side quests through a post. I said, well, they'll tie it into the story. They'll say there's like a Mako pipe leaking somewhere, and that like the rats are getting into that and they're becoming like mutated rats. And Shinra doesn't care because it's like the slums or whatever, right? We have to deal with the issue ourselves, but it's getting out of hand. Like, Cloud, can you help? I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that my speculation, like me, just some guy on the internet, wrote a better rats quest right there, right, than what we actually got in the game.
Right.
And it's like, how can that happen? Right? Like the side quests either need to be better written and tied into the narrative, like much better and with much more attention to detail for them to feel meaningful, which is the Witcher approach, right? Or you need to make them just complete gameplay optional in the Crisis Core route, right? Where they are complete like VR separate missions, have nothing to do with the main story. You can complete them at leisure, right? Like at any point. You like give Cloud the VR goggles to take with him wherever. Don't just have him with Chadley, and allow Cloud to just put them on, right? Whenever you want. Maybe like at a save bench or something, you can do that. Like do one or the other. Don't try and like straddle the line of like side quests that's extra content but not meaningful to the story, right? Because then you get into like this very fetch questy feel.
I see what you're saying, that it should be clear to the player which one you're getting into. So certain quests, it would be obvious that this is going to be very story based, and you should know that. Whereas if you just put on a VR helmet, that's not going to be some deep, rich story. It's not going to be expansive. It will feel optional. But because they have more satisfying plot plot related side quests mixed in with go find 5 cats. You don't really know. You don't want to miss anything. So you end up having to do a bunch of dumb stuff that you probably didn't want to do, that wasn't rewarding, that took an hour and a half, when you could have just avoided it if they had done a better job of separating those two.
Yes, exactly. Like, it's do one or the other. Either make, or like I mentioned before, you can do the Xenoblade route where you have side quests, but they end up just getting completed naturally as you progress through the game, which is kind of what they did.
The
with
ones in Xenoblade kind of serve a second purpose because they're not required to do, and your characters don't try to motivate you to do them. They're kind of just like there on the map. And Xenoblade does kind of have moments where you tell yourself, I should grind to make this a lot easier for myself. And I think the amount of side quests they offer are just means to build your EXP without feeling like you're doing a complete grind fest.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
FF7 doesn't really have any moments where you tell yourself, man, I really want to grind, because the stats honestly didn't really matter that much to me.
Yeah, you'll tweak your materia setup instead, right? Or if you're having issues, or change your party members maybe a little bit, but yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, like, in FF7R, Chadley is, I think, a pretty good example, because his side quests, right, the battle intel stuff, is just like stagger 10 enemies, or use the character's unique abilities on a staggered enemy. You're going to complete them as you play the game anyway, right? That's kind of easy side content to add to the game that also doesn't feel like it's in the way of the story, essentially.
Sure.
That's more of the Xenoblade style. You've added in optional objectives into the game that don't feel like they're dragging it out. So like they had some success here. It wasn't all terrible.
Sure.
Right. But like the ones that were terrible stick out like really badly, like Find the Kids or Find the Cats.
Yeah, it feels tacked on.
Yeah, stuff like that.
I guess this kind of leads into one other thing I want to bring up here with the improvement aspect. And this, again, will tie into a solution with the side quest. But, this was built to us or marketed to us as an expansion to Midgar. And we definitely got that. We definitely did get to see more areas. The areas we got to revisit areas that were bigger and larger. But we didn't get to see a whole lot of new areas like I thought we were going to get to see. And that's fine. Well, I mean, it would have been preferable if we saw other areas like on the top plate, like they said, or different sectors, but if you're just going to flesh out the areas that we're in, that's fine too. But the problem I found for the first half of the game was that they were very long hallways with lots of like windy paths. But once you went through and killed some of the enemies, if you went back, it was basically empty. And these junkyards that supported these sectors would be 20 times the size of the sector that they were supporting. And it would be essentially empty. There would be no reason for you to go back there. And so it felt small despite the fact that it was bigger. And one way they could have gone around that was if they had like the train yard story segment, if that was a side quest where they said, okay, hey, my kid died. I feel restless because his spirit's not at ease. I think it's related to the train yard. Can you take this up as a merc? And you have to go out there and slay the ghosts or whatever. And it's a whole story sequence that would have added some world building to that area that they created. And they didn't really do that in a way where the side quests were helping flesh out the areas so they didn't feel empty, because even the respawn rate for the first half of the game, the monsters would respawn every 10 minutes or something like that. So it felt very, very empty to me. And if you're not going to explore the other parts of the city, they could have done a better job of just making this area feel more alive rather than just, hey, go back down this hallway that has nothing to do in it.
Yeah, feel larger. And yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, I think that's the only thing. Obviously, I mean, it would have been an improvement if they didn't do the ending to this game. in my book, but you know,
Yeah, that's just like a decision. That's like a decision that comes from the top down. I think what we're actually pointing out here in this segment is like
their
things that you
vision.
things that you could have done to improve the game as it is now, right? Without like really changing the whole ending or like sequel aspect of the game, right?
Right.
These are like gameplay or story improvements that can like really make it feel like a more cohesive world,
Mm-hmm.
or story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, they straight out were advertising or saying that like we feel it's necessary to expand on Midgar, but they didn't really expand on Midgar. For the most part, they gave us what we already know. They gave us a small tidbits here and there, but they didn't actually
The way
truly expand on Midgar. We don't know more. We know so little more than we did than when we played the original game.
Yeah, I mean they did expand in Wall Market, stuff like that, but the primary way they expanded Midgar was having long sewer dungeons, having long junkyard dungeons, and while that's fine, I don't think that that was the way people thought they were going to expand it or would have preferred. And I saw
Right.
one person online trying to that I was talking with, we were having a discussion, and he was making the case that he felt the sewer dungeons and all the dungeons in general being long added to the sense of distance or scale of Midgar, which I thought was an interesting remark. However, I don't think that's preferable. They could have shown that distance in a different way. And that doesn't necessarily make sense with all the dungeons. For example, Hojo's dungeon is 10 times as big as any sector we visited, right? Or, the reason the dungeons felt long wasn't just the distance, but also the amount of obstacles that were in place.
Mhm.
Right? The hand portion going in Sector 6, the having 3 boss battles in the sewers and the and the train yard. So I just want to put that out there also as just like a kind of a addition to this padding issue. So
Yeah. I mean, in regards to the what that person you were discussing with mentioned about the dungeons being longer to make the overall
Mhm.
world feel bigger, I agree and disagree. Like I agree that that is a good way to do it. I think the way that they did it here was not very effective because if you remember, you have that entire sewer dungeon and the train graveyard, right, to get to Sector 7.
Sure.
And that starts at Don Corneo's mansion, essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're trying to think about logistically where it is in the world,
Mm-hmm.
but then when you crawl under the playground equipment and go into that tunnel that leads you back to Sector 7 after the plate has collapsed, you get through it in 3 minutes, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like either the sewer dungeon and the train graveyard is having you go like way out of your way and like around,
Mhm.
like to get back to Sector 7. That may be the case, but like then it just feels unnecessary. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like
yeah, and that was a
so
point I kind of alluded to also was that, look, you can travel from Aerith's Church to Wall Market in about 15 minutes if you just trek it right the whole way.
yeah.
And it takes 2 hours to get from, Wall Market to Sector 7 through the dungeon.
Yeah.
There's a clear line here where they felt it was necessary to show that distance in these dungeons, but not in the areas where people actually live.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it was something that could have been improved for sure. And yeah, is there anything else we want to bring up here?
I mean, there's other things, but that was the biggest one for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I would have done is just having Aerith know things in advance. I just would have entirely removed that. And I guess that's changing the ending as well. So maybe that's not in keeping with this topic, but I just didn't think that was a good addition. So
Yeah.
Or at least clarify what's going on a little bit better. Have this be presented as a sequel. Have this be shown in the beginning of the game that this things are different, and not try to keep it a secret. I don't think that really assisted the narrative or the story in a way that was a good payoff. So,
yeah.
All right, let's move on to Discord questions, and I think that will wrap us up. Okay, so we have some Discord questions here that we want to address about the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and in particular, these are coming from our Discord server, so if you would like to ask about future games or you just want to be involved in the discussion, we do have a Discord server. Link is in the description. However, the sheer volume of content that Discord server channel has had on Final Fantasy VII Remake is quite extensive. I think it would fill pages and pages and pages of comments. So we basically took some of the first couple of questions that we saw, and we've been just commenting in the Discord server, on our Discord server, about some of the other stuff, and we'll continue to do that in the future. So the first three questions we have here, first one is from Lane, who says, I'm sure you guys will be covering the ending pretty heavily. We did. But I would also be interested in hearing some of your predictions on things that may happen in the next game that were different from the original. So this is the first question here. Let's just go ahead and kind of elaborate on this. We slightly covered this a little bit of kind of jokingly where they might take it, but you know, now that we have some more information, some people are kind of in the boat that they're going to stick to the same story beats. I tend to think they're going to change stuff. I don't see why they would have this completely new ending and, you know, introduce this idea that we can change Destiny just to simply have a second game that would go through all the same story beats. But I
think they're going to do both.
Yeah, I think they're going to be somewhere in the middle, right? So I don't think it's going to be a completely different game. I think they're going to have a lot of the same story beats the original had, but I think that there's going to be far more changes in this second version than there were in this first version.
I think the biggest points of the game they're going to change. I don't think like the more smaller stuff, like going to Junon or getting on a boat and like dressing up as sailors, I think that's still going to happen. Or Cloud disguising himself as a infantryman to impress, or you know, to get past everything to get on the boat, and but I definitely think things like Yuffie and Vincent are going to be mandatory. They're not going to be like they're not going to be optional characters. I'm sure they're not going to put that much effort into making like split decisions.
Yeah.
So I think those type of beats will still happen, but I think like the bigger moments, like when we go to like maybe the temple, or when we go to Cosmo Canyon, I think probably some things are going to get altered in the story.
Here's the thing that's kind of interesting to ponder, though. And I went back just for context for some of our listeners, because I've seen a lot of people say, you guys should go watch Maximilian Dude's theories on the future. It's really fascinating, etc. So I went and watched a podcast with him with Easy Allies. That guy is great at theorizing the future. And I think that if they used a lot of his ideas, which I'll kind of outline here in a moment, I think that it would be really, really cool if they did some of that stuff. I think that people are setting themselves up for disappointment, though, because we saw this with Final Fantasy Peasant, where he was theorizing all this cool stuff with the astrals in Final Fantasy 15, and they ended up not really doing that as well as he had said.
Yeah.
And it was like, dude, you should have used Final Fantasy Peasant's ideas, because those were way better than what you had, you know? So I feel that it's probably a similar boat with Maximilian Dude, where he has some really good ideas, but basically his idea is that they're going to hit all the same story beats, basically the same, but because there's timeline changes, basically a butterfly effect with the timeline, you're going to see things that are slightly, you're going to see isolated areas that are affected differently. So he points out that because it implies that Biggs and Jesse are alive, or it shows Biggs alive, that maybe you're going to get to the gold saucer and Jesse's going to be an actress there. She never joined Avalanche, and her father will still be alive, but she's not going to recognize you guys. And it's going to be like an emotional moment, because Barrett's going to be losing his his mind because Jesse's alive, but she doesn't recognize you. And there's going to be a sequence of events with that. Or they might have other moments that are similar to that where it plays out a little bit differently because of the time changes. And, you know, he's also talking about they're setting up us to think that Aerith might not die now that they've kind of alluded that this is an inspiration for them to change destiny because Aerith dies, but that they're going to kill her anyways. But it's going to be more powerful because we all think that they're not going to do it because they've alluded that, you know, the times have changed. This is all fascinating stuff, but I think that, you know, from the interviews we saw with Ultimania, they don't even know how they're going to do the next game. They're still talking about whether it's going to be multiple episodes or part 2 or part 3. They don't know what they're going to do. So I suspect that this isn't a masterful weaving. I think that they have general ideas they're going to do, but it's just, I bet you they're filling in a lot of blanks as they make the game. So, but it is fascinating stuff. Do you think they're going to do anything with any of that, or maybe Zach, how they're going to tie that in, or do you think that stuff's going to be completely abandoned?
Well, I think it's going to be there. I think they're just going to screw it up.
To touch real quick on
I hit a lot of stuff. Sorry,
what you said there on at the end, Hat, about the whole idea of like Aerith being alive because we can change destiny, right? But now it'll happen anyway, and then that'll feel impactful. To me, it won't.
Okay.
Even if they played it out that way, because I will be thinking about like what they were trying to do, right? I'll be thinking about the storytellers rather than the story. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Like I'll be thinking more so about like, oh, like this was their way of trying to make this impactful moment impactful, even though we all know it's coming. But I won't be thinking about the moment itself as like, oh, now I'm like impacted, you know, by this happening. That's just me. Like that's just a preference. I want to be like in the story, thinking about the story, and then afterwards go back and, you know, maybe do some research into seeing like how the developers made those decisions, like trying to convey those moments, you know, like to hit those right emotional beats. I don't want to be thinking about that during the story. And because they've added this whole change destiny thing, that's all anyone is thinking about is, will Aerith still die? Right? That's like the big thing. That's the big speculation point moving forward. And now, if she does, right, it's going to be like you said. Like if she still does die, then it's going to be just like what you said. It will be, well, it still had the impact because of the whole changing destiny thing, but there are some things you can't change, right? And it'll be shocking in that way. Or it'll happen as it won't happen and she'll survive, and then it'll be like, well, this is not, you'll still be thinking about the storytellers because you'll just be thinking, well, why'd they want to change it so drastically, right? So in either scenario, it's like, like there was a for me, it's just frustrating.
I think that, like, aside from what is most rewarding, I do think there's a possibility they're going to try. I think that he's on to something, that they're trying to give us a clue that she might be able to make it, just to kind of add to that suspense, because it's a big moment.
Mm-hmm.
I have certainly fallen the camp that I would rather the game have followed the original script and we just saw things play out like they did.
Yeah.
You know, because it is, regardless of wanting that shock's only going to happen once, you know? So if you fool me into thinking that it's not going to happen and it happens again, well, that's kind of cool, I guess. It's not as riveting the second time. I would rather things be set up in a way that feel well designed. And I guess they could design that in a way to where, you know, it makes sense. I know Max brings up that because they saw the vision of her dying, that Cloud's going to be insecure about it, that Sephiroth's going to be manipulating him to believe that he's the one that does it. And they're going to keep having these conversations up to that moment that Cloud's saying, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm not going to let that happen. And it's going to happen. And that might be okay. I could see them doing that. I just hope they don't. I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
But I don't see them not. I see some people really commenting that they're basically going to do the same exact stuff. There'll be no difference. And I don't see how that's possible because you have Aerith that knows lots of stuff she shouldn't. You have the party knowing that Aerith is going to die. You have reveals that were not supposed to happen yet. And you have a character, a villain, Sephiroth, who's from the future that already knows what happened. Why would Sephiroth do the same exact stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Unless they write out that somehow he lost his memory or something, or the whole party loses their memory and now they don't remember this stuff. I don't see, things happening exactly like they were before. I imagine the biggest departures are going to be with Sephiroth. So,
yeah.
But guys, got any other predictions?
Well, I do, based around the whole Zack thing.
Okay.
Right. So I think that we're gonna get a DLC for FF7 Remake Part 1, and it's gonna be Zack going through
key moments
of the original game, of Part 1, right? Of FF7 Remake Part 1. Because that's going to allow them to reuse the assets, right, that they built.
Yeah.
And a lot of the boss encounters and enemy designs and everything. They really just need Zack's model and animations and bring the voice actors back in for the characters that will appear to voice the scenes differently. But it will be abridged, right? It's gonna be a probably $15 to $20 DLC, right? And you'll do the first bombing mission, the second bombing mission, and maybe the plate collapse sequence, and they'll show you how things played out differently. Then in part 2, we'll probably get some scenes of like the parallel timelines are going, right? So you'll complete a scenario with your main party, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you'll get some flashes of Zack and the party completing things a little bit differently as you go, right? And they'll be playing up this parallel timeline idea, right? And then maybe at the end of part 2 or beginning of part 3, the timelines are somehow going to converge, and Zack is going to be in the party.
So I don't know what they're going to do, and if they do that, I've had similar thoughts that they might do all that, and I don't like that idea at all. I don't think you do either, obviously. That
I don't, but I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, unfortunately. It's, I see some people that are saying that they felt that this whole timeline thing was just an excuse to have a big boss at the end of part 1, and that they're going to totally abandon that in part 2.
Maybe.
But then why did they have the Zack stuff? Why did they show Big still alive? Why did
none of that was necessary for the big Sephiroth battle at the end. Yeah.
Well,
right.
If there's anything Square Enix is good at, it's being consistently inconsistent.
Yeah.
So I imagine that in some ways, given how divisive part 1 has been, I do think they're probably going to try to walk back some of this timeline stuff in part 2. And I think in retrospect, it's going to be slightly controversial because they tried to do that with Final Fantasy 13 too, right? Where they tried to walk back some stuff in 13 and it pissed everyone off because they essentially just retconned stuff by making it not happen. It's possible that they might take a route with part 2 on this to try to, oh, don't worry. It is a remake, and I don't know how I'm going to feel about that. I guess I'll appreciate it if it's more consistent with the original, but it's going to be a little weird and clunky, to play these 2 games back to back if they do that. So,
yeah.
So I don't know. I think mostly where we're at now is we have to wait till we see a trailer, because I see Katase's in interviews saying that it's going to be a remake. It's not going to be drastically different, but this is so early, and given how unreliable Katase has been on part 1,
yeah,
we're not going to know until we see a trailer. So, So anyways, we also have 2 questions from Demosthenes. We basically answered these earlier, but she says, Since there'll be inevitable comparisons to OG FF7 and FF7R on which did what better, what in your opinion are the biggest pros and cons of the changes to the story? We actually had a segment about that we talked about some of the stuff we changed that we thought was better, and then, or just in keeping with the original, and then a lot of the controversial moments that were changed that we talked about earlier in the podcast. But we appreciate you asking that question. That kind of inspired us to have that topic, so we appreciate that. And then she also asked, so what's your opinions on how the remake was handled, or handled Sephiroth? Because frankly, I found him extremely goofy with his single expression, weird smile, and over-the-top hammy dialogue. He wasn't intimidating or scary in the least, and he wasn't even a hard fight. Yeah, we addressed that in the first part or last podcast episode where we talked about the ending of the game and kind of going into Sephiroth there, but I think we all agreed that we weren't thrilled with his presentation, right?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, they
Some of the worst parts in the game involve him.
yeah, they basically changed the character almost entirely, other than, you know, his appearance and his kind of relationship with Cloud. But like before, he was portrayed as a horror monster, and now he's been turned into the Terminator, essentially, right? Like literally going back in time to kill, you know, to change.
And we're
history.
asking ourselves ridiculous questions right now. Like, is this the Sephiroth from the original 7? Is this the Sephiroth from Advent Children who's come back in time?
Mhm.
Like, and if this is the one that came back in time, where is the original one? I mean, the original one's obviously hanging out in, you know, North Crater, but
this that just causes so much clunkiness, because if the original's hanging out in the crater, then is that one still doing stuff like he did in the original?
Yeah.
Do we have
like who's
Sephiroths
manipulating
running around?
Yeah, like who's manipulating the clones, right? Is it actually the Sephiroth in the North Crater as it was in the original, or is it this somehow new Sephiroth, right? Who's doing that? Are they aware of each other's existence? Like, are they working together? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, or you know, is I don't know. They'll probably explain it as some singularity moment where both the characters basically, Sephiroth understands and sees visions of the future, and therefore his mind melds into one or something. Because I think it would just be too messy to have two Sephiroths running around. Although that would be twice the danger, right?
Yeah.
To have two Sephiroths instead of one. So therefore, maybe Zach has to defeat one Sephiroth, and you have to defeat another one.
Then we can have a new debate about.
Then you have two Clouds, though.
Yeah, it's like we can have we can have a brand new debate of was Genova in control, was Sephiroth in control, or was future Sephiroth in control?
Yeah. So this has the hallmarks of just getting very, very convoluted, and I don't think that's necessarily surprising. So.
Oh, yeah. We've already jumped into Kingdom Hearts territory. It's no going back now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We do see that apparently Nomura is not going to be directing the next one. Apparently it's just going to be Hamaguchi, which he's a co-director on this. He's kind of a newer guy for a directing role. Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting. I was kind of excited about that, but then I found out it was Hamaguchi's idea to throw Sephiroth in at the end as a final boss fight. And I thought that was very strange. So
that's where you need someone like a Sakaguchi or someone who has a little more restraint when they get pitched that idea to say either that won't work or, okay, maybe we put that in as a VR battle, right? As a simulation, right? This is like a simulation of Sephiroth, and then you can fight him in that way, you know? Something like that, other than we really want this boss battle at the end of the game, and now we have to like kind of make drastic changes to the plot in order for that to happen, you know?
Right. The only way I could...
Sakaguchi will make you go back and take a belt buckle off the character because it just shined in the way he didn't like it, and make the whole development crew like start over again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get the impression that since we know that Sakaguchi was such a hardcore manager, people respected him, but he was very opinionated. He was very controlling about stuff, and probably a good way because the product turned out well.
Yeah,
But-
he was tough but fair.
Right. But
He didn't, from what I hear, he didn't just say it has to be done this way because I said so. He will be like, this has to be done this way because,
or just try
like,
again. Let's do a little bit better. Yeah.
yeah,
But-
he's like, it has to be done this way because it, like, and he'll point out like what's working and that's not working. Like, so he wasn't like, you have to do it because I said so. I know better than you. Maybe he did, but just the stuff I've read from like other people who comment on him,
Mm-hmm.
it was just like a tough but fair type of deal.
Yeah. But the thing is, Katase is now kind of in his role, at least from a hierarchy standpoint of Katase is in charge of the Final Fantasy brand. And I've gotten the impression, and this is my own interpretation, that maybe Katase, while he respected Sakaguchi, did not appreciate the amount of hands-on time that Sakaguchi had as a leader. And maybe he wished that when he was in that spot, you know, as a director, that he had wished that Sakaguchi kind of was not so hands-on, because Katase in a producer role, he just does not get hands-on with stuff. It seems to me he's more concerned about being supportive of the people that are under him and wanting to support the creative decisions they want to make, which is cool. But, you know, we saw with 13 and all the sequels, and also, you know, with the 7 remake, that he doesn't step in when there's a bad idea. He seems very much wanting to just support them in their creative outlet. And I wonder if that's a response to Sakaguchi's style of leadership, where he thought, you know what, I don't appreciate this guy breathing down my neck. I'm not going to be like that when I'm in that position. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
He like, exactly. I think exactly what you said. Like, Sakaguchi, when he moved into the producer role, he was still hands-on, right? So he had his foot in both camps of a creator, but also a project manager, right? And maybe it's because he was in both that one of his projects, you know, the Spirits Within, kind of flopped, right? Because he was not totally on the ball with the project management side of things, you know, the money business side of things. That's all speculation. We don't really actually know. But Kitase seems to have very clearly made a choice of, I can only be one or the other, right? And if I'm the producer on this role, I'm just going to focus all on project management, like leadership of the team, making sure they're on task with their day-to-day responsibilities.
Make sure we're in budget.
Yeah, and leave all the creative stuff to Nomura and those other guys. And I think he said like he got to design like a floor of the Shinra building and like a couple other
the 69th and 70th floor.
Yeah, but other than that, he was like you said, totally hands off. So it's a completely different approach, and maybe one that's not for the best.
Well, and I think that I've seen some interviews with him after the remake came out. It might even be from the Ultimania, but he says that since the remake has come out, that he's talked extensively. He wants to tell the fans that he's talked extensively with the developers of the next part, that this needs to be, you need to have the story beats in there from the original, that like, please keep in mind that this is going to be a remake. And I just get the impression that these extensive talks as him just in like a conference room saying, you know, guys, I think like it would be better financially if you would just make this as a remake. And they're like, okay. And then he walks out of the room and they just do whatever they want. And he just is like, okay, if that's what you want to do, I guess we'll, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's why he's saying like, oh no, the story will be the same, even though from a lot of our perspective, it's kind of gone off the rails at this point already.
Yeah. So. Yeah. But yeah, we have other questions, other comments, other conversations on our Discord server. So like I said, there's a link in the description, and I would suggest just checking that out. That way you can join in on the conversation and, you know, talk to your heart's content. We'll definitely be in there to respond to that and kind of converse with you all, or just leave a comment in the description of our YouTube channel, and we can converse with you there as well. But I think that wraps up our Final Fantasy VII Remake spoiler conversation. It's been a long one. It's been quite the trek. It's been a multi-part saga, but we finally made it. We're to the end. And, next week we will be back probably with our typical format where we'll be talking about something that's not necessarily related to the 7 Remake, probably some Trials of Mana reactions or impressions from me and Eric, and who knows what else. But we appreciate you all listening to us and sticking with us, and we will see you all next week.
Take care.
See you next time.